Chapter 3:13. Chuckling, Yen Bugue habitually glanced to the left and right, then told Wu Qi the truth. It was true that White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect had restricted the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties from entering and leaving Myriad Immortals' planet. Over the past 3 years, only a few emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties were allowed to visit White Cloud Planet and the planets occupied by Tranquil Vimla Sect through the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. One reason was to appreciate the local conditions and customs of the 2 great immortal sects, and treat it as a sightseeing tour. Another reason was that, as these emperors and ministers were the nominal disciples of the 2 great immortal sects, they had to show their faces at their headquarters, to see how the headquarters of their sects looked like, and to establish a good relationship with the many executing elders in their sections. However, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect should not have allowed Mod and Gigazi, the 2 old misters, to take a stroll through the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. Over the past 3 years, the 2 old misters had entered and exited the formation 6 times. Relying on the enlightenment gained from these 6 times, combined with the magical properties of short-distance teleportation formations, the 2 old misters managed to construct a grand universal teleportation formation that belonged to the 6 dynasties 1 month ago. As if they had found a priceless treasure, the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties immediately gathered a great amount of materials and constructed dozens of large-scale teleportation formations in dozens of top-secret places on Myriad Immortals' planet. Each teleportation formation was heavily guarded by the 6 dynasties to prevent the secret from leaking out. Mod and Gigazi, on the other hand, had not only constructed the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, but also found several dozens of different coordinates that led to other planets from the teleportation formations of the 2 great immortal sections. In other words, the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties could now freely enter and leave Myriad Immortals' planet, and they could not only go to the planets controlled by the 2 great immortal sections. According to Yen Bugui, all the people of the 6 dynasties who knew about this had sworn a vicious oath that they would never reveal the existence of Myriad Immortals' planet. After all, it was closely related to their own interests, and none of them would be stupid enough to expose a priceless planet to more people. Unless it was an outsider like Wu Qi, who was forced into a desperate situation and saw that he was about to be suppressed by the joint forces of the enemies, and his life was threatened, who among the influential nobles born and bred in the 6 dynasties would sell a priceless planet to someone else. So, Wu Qi stared blankly at Yen Bugui. So, Yen Bugui blinked his eyes and looked at Wu Qi. Now, the elite troops of various countries have secretly gone to various planets and are doing exactly what we did on White Cloud Planet. In short, he would first control a few puppets and then fight for territory in the mortal world for his country. Once we control enough mortal countries, we will infiltrate the immortal sects that control the various planets. Once the people we control have enough power in those immortal sects, we will gather the power of the 6 countries to overthrow that immortal sect and replace it. Rubbing his palms hard, Yen Bugui smiled and said, "The imperial advisors and the 6 emperors are just 1 step away from becoming heaven immortals. As long as we have heaven immortals in our countries, the sky will be high and the sea will be wide, and we will be able to do whatever we want. His Majesty has said it himself, why can't this part of the starry sky become the territory of Great Yen?" Wu Qi was at a loss. He shook his head and said helplessly, "I knew it. I knew it." Wu Qi smiled bitterly in his mind. He had lured White Cloud Immortal Sect to avoid an imminent crisis for himself, but in the end, he had brought an even greater crisis to the cultivators in this part of the starry sky. He broke a small hole in the cage that imprisoned a group of fierce tigers. Then, the group of tigers leaped out of the cage happily, and could not wait to eat the humans. God bless them. Wu Qi stretched out his hand and drew a cross on his chest. Yen Bugui did not understand the meaning of Wu Qi's gesture. Surprised, he asked, "God? The legendary ancient heavenly emperor?" Wu Qi answered Yen Bugui's question with a vague answer. He shook his head and breathed out a long sigh. Well, after 3 years of recuperation, Wu Qi had no choice but to work hard to catch up, to develop his overall strength on various planets. At least, he needed the power to protect himself, enough to keep himself alive from those enemies. It was hard to imagine how much pressure Wu Qi would have to face when Heaven Immortals emerged from the 6 dynasties, wiped out many immortal sects, and took control of many immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy. Perhaps? Should Wu Qi inform Patriarch Jiang Yun now? But very soon, Wu Qi dismissed the idea. Those who left Myriad Immortals planet were not only from the few dynasties, but also from Great Yen. In Great Yen dynasty, not only did he have enemies, he also had friends and brothers. Especially, Princess Zhonglu was born in Great Yen, and her father was Yen Qijuan, the crown prince of Great Yen. No matter how powerful Wu Qi was, he could not change this fact. Perhaps he could stop the secret operation of the 6 dynasties, but it would mean breaking off all relations with the people of the 6 dynasties. Even Jing Ku and the others would not forgive Wu Qi. At the very least, now that the 2 immortal sects had occupied White Cloud Immortal Sect and rescued the 6 dynasties from the hands of Han Shao Immortal and the other evil immortals, the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties would owe Wu Qi a favor. At least, it was Wu Qi's plan that allowed the 2 relatively gentle and relaxed immortal sects to descend upon Myriad Immortals' planet, and not those evil immortals who were greedy, evil, and bloodthirsty by nature. Therefore, although no one said it out loud, everyone knew very well that the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties actually owed Wu Qi a favor. Even though it was because of him that Wu Qi brought the 2 immortal sects here, all the people of the 6 dynasties owed him a favor. But once Wu Qi leaked the secret of the 6 dynasties' plan to Patriarch Jiang Yun, the 6 dynasties would instantly become Wu Qi's enemies. Just think about it, all the people of the 6 dynasties would become his enemies. Ing Zheng, Yan Dan, Tian Wen, Zhao Sheng, Chu Ping, Wei Wuji, Mod, Sun Kuang, Giguzi. Wu Qi took a deep breath, completely dispelling the impulse to leak the secret. Shaking his head helplessly, he said, "I want Gu Tai dynasty." A smile emerged on Yen Bugui's face, then he lowered his voice and said, "What General Jing Ku said is right. Even if Duke of Tianyun learns about this, he will only take a share of the benefits, and will never leak the secret to White Cloud Immortal Sect." The hair on Wu Qi's back suddenly stood up. He glared at Yen Bugui, sneered and said, "Do I look like that, kind of a man? What did General Jing Ku say?" Yen Bugui nodded and said, "Half a month ago, when the people of the 6 dynasties were dispatched, General Jing Ku said that we should inform Duke of Tianyun and sect leader in advance. General Jing Ku said that after all, we are on the same side. The reason why Duke of Tianyun joined White Cloud Immortal Sect is to resist the pressure from Lu Buwei, Xiang Yu, and the others. As long as Duke of Tianyun has the overall strength to fight against them, Duke of Tianyun will not be loyal to White Cloud Immortal Sect." Wu Qi gave Yen Bugui a glance speechlessly. It was a very bad feeling, as it was a very bad feeling to be seen through by someone. Over the past few days, he had not contacted Lu Chengfeng and the others, as he had been spending all his time with Princess Zhonglu on White Cloud Planet. That was why he did not know about the major change. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi stretched out his hand and said, "I want a copy of the location of all the grand universal teleportation formations on Myriad Immortals planet. After that, I'll summon all the people from the 6 dynasties in Tai City. With my status as the executing disciple of White Cloud Immortal Sect's Discipline Hall, I'll announce that Gu Tai dynasty is my territory. They can do whatever they want in other places, but this place, this dynasty, is mine." Yen Bugui grinned, then fished out a jade slip and gave it to Wu Qi. After that, he sent his divine will into the jade slip and memorized the coordinates. After that, Wu Qi selected several hundred remote planets from the several thousands of coordinates he had identified from the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation on White Cloud Planet and imprinted them into the jade slip. Throwing the jade slip back to Yen Bugui, Wu Qi smiled and said, "I'll give you a chance to earn some merit. Give this jade slip to His Majesty, and tell him that it's the coordinates of the planets that you and I discovered together. His Majesty will be pleased, as it will give us, Great Yen, an absolute strategic advantage." Compared to the other 5 dynasties, Great Yen had control over several hundred planets' coordinates. As long as they could send some capable men to make arrangements in advance on those planets, it would be a great advantage. Yen Bugue was struck with wild joy. Of course, he knew the significance of these coordinates. Each planet represented countless mortals and a vast amount of resources. Even though the cultivation resources produced by a planet were limited, when the resources produced by several hundred or even thousands of planets were gathered together and provided for the benefit of the upper echelons of a dynasty, it would be an astronomical figure. Many immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy had reached a tacit agreement, reaching a delicate balance. No one dared to invade the planets of another. But the group of people from 6 dynasties was different. Their foundation was in Myriad Immortals' planet, and they were outsiders. They could use all the means they had without any scruples, and they had the ambition, confidence, and ability to invade this part of the starry sky. Holding the jade slip in his hand, Yen Bugue was grinning from ear to ear. No matter where Wu Qi found these coordinates, as long as he could prove that these coordinates were real, perhaps the merit would be enough for him to be conferred a decent title of nobility, marquis, or something else. Wu Qi frowned and pondered without saying a word. All of a sudden, he heard a rapid wind-piercing noise coming from a distance. He raised his head abruptly and cried out in a low voice, "Who are you trying to assassinate? What is the cultivation base of those great Zhao sinecures? Do they know that you are from Great Yan's scouting office?" Yen Bugue raised his brows and said in shock, "The man we are trying to assassinate is the right commander of Gu Tai Dynasty's imperial army. Once we kill him, the deputy commander controlled by Great Yen will take over his position and control 1/3 of the imperial army. But there are a few nascent soul sinecures from Great Zhao here, and I believe they have recognized the cultivation technique we are practicing. After all, only Great Yan's scouting office uses a large number of wind-breaking wolves as beast souls." Wu Qi sprung to his feet abruptly. The wind-piercing noise was getting closer and closer. Wu Qi raised his head and looked up, and saw a few bright beams pressing down from the clouds high up in the sky. "Gold horn, silver horn, get ready to fight the enemy." Wu Qi cried out sternly. "Yen Bugue, retreat now, and help me protect my 2 disciples." Before his words could fade away, a wretched green ghost suddenly emerged from the void next to Wu Qi. A man with a strange face that made him look like an evil ghost leaped out and hugged Wu Qi. His body expanded at an incredible speed, while a very dense ghost energy wrapped around Wu Qi. "Not good!" cried Wu Qi. Without hesitation, he sprung into a bright beam and shot up into the sky, flying up together with the man. The speed of the magnetic sword escape beam was incredibly fast. When Wu Qi had flown less than 10 miles away with the man, a loud boom rang out. The man who was hugging Wu Qi had self-detonated his nascent soul, unleashing a glowing green ghost flame that enveloped Wu Qi entirely. The shockwave spread out in all directions, lifting and shattering the rock layers one by one. Large amounts of crushed rocks and soil were sent flying several dozens of miles away. Yen Bugue and his company were forced to lie flat on the ground, nearly blown away by the strong wind. Yen Bugue fixed his gaze at the direction where the green light emerged, roaring at the top of his voice. It was a death warrior, a nascent soul death warrior. Who was the mastermind behind this bold move of using a nascent soul death warrior to kill Wu Qi? Chapter 3:14. It was an early-stage nascent soul realm Earth immortal who suddenly leaped out and hugged Wu Qi. On top of that, he was a ghost immortal who practiced the cultivation technique of ghost cultivators. His entire body was stained with ghost aura and death aura, and every single strand of his hair contained the most poisonous phosphorescence. Different from the ghost immortal guards secretly trained by Great Yen Imperial Palace, this ghost immortal was half human and half ghost. Half of his body was condensed from ghost aura, and the power of his self-explosion was extremely powerful. Wu Qi was caught unprepared, and the ghost immortal got close to him. Fearing that the self-explosion would hurt Yen Bugue and the others, Wu Qi hastily rode on the sword beam and fled far away. But before he could travel 10 miles away, the ghost immortal had already self-detonated. Deadly venom, evil aura, and shrill ghost howls that could directly attack one's soul came crashing towards Wu Qi, enveloping him tightly. They were about to tear his body apart, crush him, melt him into a clump of venomous liquid, and then be burned into ashes by the phosphorescence. Before the innate earth element dragon scale shield could be activated, the black dragon spirit ring worn by Wu Qi had already reacted. A dragon roar rang out, as countless pitch-black dragon scales shot out from the surface of the black dragon spirit ring, sticking closely to Wu Qi's body and forming into a set of sturdy dragon scale armor. A large sheet of bright light was seen rolling and rocking rapidly on the surface of the armor. The dense patterns on the surface of the dragon scales tore and crushed the tremendous pressure bit by bit, allowing it to quickly disperse through Wu Qi's body, preventing it from causing too much damage to Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi's body was trembling violently, and he nearly fainted from the impact. Although the black dragon spirit ring had taken the initiative to protect him, and he had been diligently cultivating the dragon transformation script for the past 3 years to gradually improve the strength of his fleshly body, the explosion still made him cough out a mouthful of blood. Stars swayed before his eyes, and all his internal organs were shaking violently, as if they were about to burst out from his mouth. Fortunately, the spirit-restricting rope was an immortal item, and its item spirit had cultivated to the realm of spirit immortal. Although it did not have a fleshly body, and was only a thread of its divine spirit, it was still an immortal item. A beam of purple light shot out from Wu Qi's left wrist, coiling around Wu Qi like a flood dragon, shattering more than 80% of the energy ripples produced by the nascent Soul Earth Immortal's self-detonation. A faintly discernible figure emerged from the rope, performing an incantation gesture with both hands and releasing it into the surroundings, quickly calming the violent energy ripples in the surroundings. If not for the spirit-restricting rope taking the initiative, the self-detonation of a nascent soul realm Earth Immortal would have turned everything within a radius of 100 miles into dust, and none of Yen Bugue and the others would have escaped. The spirit-restricting rope calmed down the ripples of energy in the surroundings, and only then did the item's spirit return to it. The purple gleam retracted and returned to Wu Qi's wrist, transforming into a thin thread. Wu Qi threw his head back and roared furiously, "Bastard! Don't let me know who you are, or else." Amidst a few beams of light falling down from the sky, a surprised cry of Duke of Longyang was heard. "Io, isn't this Duke of Tianyun? How did he end up in such a sorry state?" Stuff. "This is Duke Tianyun of Great Yen Dynasty. He is one of us, Great Wei's man." As the bright light faded away, the enchanting Lord of Longyang descended from the sky, stepping on a jade-colored silk handkerchief while smiling. Seeing that figure, that graceful bearing, as well as the high-grade magic treasure embroidered handkerchief under his feet, Wu Qi did not know why, but all the hairs on his body stood on end. After retrieving the dragon scale armor transformed from the black dragon spirit ring, Wu Qi spat out a mouthful of saliva mixed with blood, then flew back to the side of Yen Bugue and the others. Both Goldhorn and Silverhorn were very clever and quick-witted. When the self-explosion happened, the two great pythons shot out like two rainbows. Goldhorn coiled up into a snake formation, protecting Yen Bugue and a few other scouting officers, while Silverhorn rushed forward and surrounded Li Yifeng and Zi Qinyan. When the ghost immortal self-detonated, a great amount of rocks came smashing and smashed onto the two great pythons, producing countless sparks. However, none of them hurt Yen Bugue, Li Feng, and Zi Qinyan. On the contrary, some of the secret agents of scouting officers had their arms or legs broken, or were thrown 7 to 8 miles away by the strong wind. However, these were just minor injuries, not worth mentioning. Throwing a bottle of healing spirit medicine to Yen Bugue, Wu Qi rolled his eyes and stared at Lord of Longyang, sneered and said, "My lord, is the guy who self-detonated your man?" Lord of Longyang's face turned pale as he kept shaking his head. Stepping on the handkerchief, he descended from the sky, which transformed into a cloud and flew back into his sleeve. Slowly, he came next to Wu Qi, gave Wu Qi a long and bitter look, breathed out a long sigh and said, "What kind of person does Duke Wu Qi think of me as?" Turning his gaze to Yen Bugue, Lord of Longyang chuckled and said, "I swear to the heaven, that man has absolutely nothing to do with me. However, Zhao does have 2 ghost immortals with him." "Zhao Ta?" Wu Qi gave Lord of Longyang a glare. Standing next to him, Yan Bugui shook his dizzy head and said hastily, "Zhao Ta, the son of great Zhao's emperor, Marquis Zhuang. Just now, when we were retreating from the village, we saw him rushing out with a group of men. He should be in that village just now." Lord of Longyang smiled and said, "With Commander Yan as witness, Longyang is innocent. I have no idea where this ghost immortal with Zhao Ta came from, but he has been following Zhao Ta since 3 years ago. Just now, when Longyang brought his men to the village, he was planning to kill Zhao Ta with a single sword strike. But unexpectedly, Zhao had already left with his men, and even the commander of Imperial Army was nowhere to be found. Who would have thought that this ghost immortal would come here to assassinate Duke Wu Qi?" Wu Qi bowed his head and pondered. After a while, Wu Qi suddenly raised his head and said with a smile, "Very well, I think I know who it is. What does my lord want to teach Wu Qi?" Lord of Longyang gave Wu Qi an appreciative look, then turned to look at Yan Bugui and said, "It is not a secret. But, according to the investigation conducted by Great Wei's Grand Council, Great Zhao believes that the person who killed Zhao Ling in Sang'ao Immortal Abode is related to Duke Wu Qi, and the person who framed up Lu Bui is also Duke Wu Qi." Wu Qi was taken aback, then he laughed and said, "Why do you say that? Wu Qi only has the cultivation base of Jindan. How could he kill people at will in Sang'ao Immortal Abode?" Lord of Longyang spread his palms, indicating that he had no idea why Great Zhao and Lu Bui could be so sure about this. Yan Bugui's face darkened as he listened to Lord of Longyang's words. As the commander of Scouting Office, he had a very sensitive sense of information. There were some things in Lord of Longyang's words that were worth investigating. Especially, how did Great Wei come to know the internal information of Great Zhao? And the relationship between Lu Bui and Great Zhao, these were all very serious matters. Wu Qi frowned, as a wave of anger rose from his heart. He said coldly, "Who cares? My lord, please deliver a message for Wu Qi. Tomorrow at noon, Wu Qi wants to meet all the people from the 6 dynasties who are in charge of Gutai dynasty's affairs in Hidden Sword Pavilion. Wu Qi wants this Gutai dynasty." Wu Qi handed the medallion that represented his identity as the executing disciple of White Cloud Immortal Sect's Discipline Hall to Lord of Longyang, then looked at Lord of Longyang, smiled and said, "I believe my lord has a way to inform these people. I'll have to trouble you, please." Lord of Longyang gave Wu Qi a glance, chuckled and said, "Duke Wu Qi, you are being too courteous and treating me like an outsider. What are these things to me? It just so happens that Longyang can get closer to Duke Wu Qi, and I'll have more chances to rely on Duke Wu Qi in the future. The wind and clouds are gathering now, and the storm is about to rise. Duke Wu Qi has been living a carefree life for 3 years, but now, he can no longer ignore the affairs of the world." Pointing his finger at the nearly 1-mile-wide crater caused by the self-explosion of the ghost immortal, Lord of Longyang stared at Wu Qi and said, "Duke Wu Qi, the matter regarding Duke Wu Qi has arrived." Wu Qi's face was gloomy, and he did not say a word. That's right, 3 peaceful years had passed, and the era of change had arrived. Regardless of whether he was willing to or not, he had to face this treacherous test. The next day, at noon, in the north private room on the 6th floor of Hidden Sword Pavilion that had just been renovated, people from 6 dynasties were sitting around a large round table. Wu Qi sat on the seat of honor, coldly looking at the group of people who sat around the table without saying a word. Lao Ai represented Great Yan. Zhao Ta represented Great Zhao. Xiang Yu represented Great Chu. Meng Tian represented Duqin. Tian Dan represented Great Qi. Lord of Longyang represented Great Wei. Wu Qi rubbed his temples with both of his hands, feeling a headache coming on. What kind of people were these? Then he looked at the 8 princes of Gutai dynasty who were serving behind these 6 lords with utmost respect, and Wu Qi nearly threw his head back and let out a long sigh. The Gutai dynasty was like a little lamb. How could it withstand the invasion of 6 hungry wolves? After a full hour of silence, during which the group of people stared at each other with their eyes wide open, Wu Qi finally said coldly, "Everyone, please give Wu Qi a little face. Wu Qi has been ordered by Jiang Qingzi, the preceptor of Discipline Hall, to deal with the succession of Gutai dynasty's imperial authority. The territory of Gutai dynasty belongs to me now. As for the other several hundred dynasties, I will not compete with any of you. I only want Gutai dynasty." Pointing at Li Yifeng, who stood next to him, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "He will be the new emperor of Gutai dynasty from now on." The 8 princes of Gutai dynasty, Qi, immediately raised their heads and glared at Li Yifeng. When Wu Qi saw the unconvinced and resentful faces of the 8 princes, he snorted coldly and said, "What? Are you not convinced? Could it be that you will only be convinced after you are punished by the sect rules?" The 8 princes exchanged a glance, bowed their heads in fear and trepidation, and dared not to say a word. Only then did they remember that they were the outer sect disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect, and this Wu Qi before them was the preceptor of Discipline Hall appointed by the sect. Even if he wanted Gutai dynasty to be replaced, he could do it with just a word. Sighing lightly, Wu Qi knocked on the table and asked in an indifferent tone, "Gentlemen, do you agree with what Wu Qi has done?" Xiang Yu gave a cold laugh, rose to his feet and swaggered out of the room. He said in an indifferent tone, "Let's see if you can keep this foundation." Duke of Longyang smiled sweetly and said with a gentle voice, "It is just a mere Gutai dynasty. If Duke Wu Qi wants it, it will belong to Duke Wu Qi." Tian Dan and the others exchanged a glance, then nodded indifferently. They really didn't put a small country in their eyes. Speaking of which, the territory of Gutai dynasty was only about the total area of the few vassal kingdoms under the 6 dynasties combined, and its resources were far less abundant than those vassal kingdoms on Myriad Immortals' planet. Therefore, it was not a loss for the 6 dynasties to give up a small Gutai dynasty. After a brief moment of pondering, Meng Tian cried out, "Duke of Tian, will you not interfere with our business in the future?" Wu Qi gave Meng Tian a deep look, who had deep eye sockets and a high nose bridge, then said with a deep voice, "Yes, it is just Gutai dynasty. This place belongs to me, and I will turn a blind eye to what you are doing. But, for the sake that we are from the same clan, Wu Qi will remind you that White Cloud Planet is the foundation of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Don't bring trouble to yourselves." Right when Wu Qi's voice faded away, a series of hurried footsteps was heard coming from outside the veranda. A man with an enchanting face, so beautiful that Wu Qi could not tell whether he was a man or a woman, rushed into the room, hastily handing over a small jade slip to Duke of Longyang. When Duke of Longyang gave the jade slip a glance with his divine will, his pretty face fell instantly. He raised his head, looked at Wu Qi and said, "The Crown Prince of Great Yen, Yen Qijuan, was attacked on Shui Yuan planet. No one knows if he is still alive or not." Wu Qi was taken aback, and he sprung to his feet. Chapter 315. She had a very beautiful face, but her face was cold, as if everyone owed her 10,000 kilograms of gold. Her gloomy face made people feel very uncomfortable. She walked with big strides, and with just a few strides, she had already walked past Yen Qijuan, past Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu. If one were to point out one thing that attracted people to this remote planet that did not have any special products, it would be the fact that the beauties of Shui Yuan planet were very famous in Liyuan Galaxy. Perhaps it was the essence of ice and snow that had forged the natural energies of the beauties of Shui Yuan planet, as they were born with fair and delicate skin, as if they were carved out of ice and snow. On top of that, they were born with a constitution of pure yin, which made them the best partners for cultivators from various sects and sects to engage in dual cultivation. The natural environment of Shui Yuan planet was extremely harsh. The entire planet was frozen all year round, and the temperature was tens of degrees below zero. The strong wind could even blow a thin man into the air. There were no other products on this planet, except for a few spirit herbs with cold element, and a few ores with the same cold element, which could be considered as the special products. Apart from that, there were also several dozens of energy stone veins, which were not too big in scale, producing energy stones with cold element. However, after so many years of excavation, the energy stone veins were drying up day by day, and the annual output was very limited. Who knew if there was a heaven immortal among Yen Qijuan and his companions? If they really did take a fancy to their daughters, that would be their chance to soar into the sky with a single bound. Indeed, the two demon kings were here to scout the planet. They were planning to travel around Shui Yuan planet and judge the overall strength of the planet. After that, they would send the information back to the numerous courtiers and fierce generals in Great Yan's imperial court, allowing them to come up with an overall plan for Shui Yuan planet. Whether they would attack and occupy the planet by force, or devour and control it secretly, it would depend on the overall strength of Shui Yuan planet, as well as their connections. There were even some bold girls, as long as they possessed spirit roots, who boldly walked out of the shop and waved at Yan Qijuan with a sweet smile on their faces. It was only a short 1,000 feet long street, but Yan Qijuan actually received handkerchiefs from dozens of girls, each of which contained fragrant fruits and the flowers of snow velvet, an ice spirit herb unique to Shui Yuan planet. Instinctively, the two demon kings gave the girl a glance with their divine will. She was just an ordinary girl, but her spirit root was pretty good. Surprisingly, she possessed the rare 9 meridians. Both demon kings gave the girl a surprised look. This girl actually possessed the 9 meridians? A good physique for dual cultivation. Yan Qijuan kept nodding his head and smiling. Sure enough, this place was a pleasant place. After staying in Ji City for so many years, Yan Qijuan finally had the chance to take a breath of fresh air and relax himself. Therefore, Yan Qijuan had made up his mind to enjoy himself to the fullest. As the crown prince of Great Yan dynasty, Yan Qijuan was cultivating with the reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 resurrections, yet he had never experienced a life and death crisis. Currently, his cultivation base was still at the peak of Jin Dan realm. The only pleasure he could think of in his life were the pursuit of wine, women, wealth, and temper. Before He Qianqiu could come to his senses, wondering how this lady knew his name, she had already punched him right in the chest. After that, like a whirlwind, the lady glided past He Qianqiu, leaving a trail of afterimages behind, and came next to Xiong Wanling. The group gradually let go of their vigilance, completely treating this as an opportunity to travel at public expense. They relaxed and enjoyed the surrounding scenery. In this Driftsnow city, there was no existence that could pose a threat to them. The strongest cultivators in the city were only 3 peak-stage nascent soul realm earth immortals. Among the people Yan Qijuan brought with him, apart from 2 demon kings who had the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm, the weakest among the over 100 personal guards was a mid-stage nascent soul realm earth immortal. The restaurant was less than 2,000 feet away from the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation of Snowflake City. When Yan Qijuan was walking towards the entrance of the restaurant, none of them noticed that the cultivators stationed near the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation of Snowflake City had been replaced by a new group of cultivators. The teleportation formation that was in operation previously had a few core formation disks taken away and had lost its function. Yan Qijuan's interest was not placed on the shops along the street or the cultivators flying back and forth in the sky. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, glancing at the beautiful girls on the street and in the shops with great interest. Indeed, Shui Yuan planet had a well-deserved reputation for producing beautiful girls. No matter it was the girls he passed by on the street or the serving ladies in the shops along the street, all of them had enchanting bodies. Their skin was especially smooth and delicate. Their fair and tender skin looked like the best tofu pudding, so fair and flawless that it could stir one's soul. Wu Qi sighed softly. Shui Yuan planet was indeed a place that could make one sink into depravity. Yan Qijuan smiled and nodded at the girl, then strode toward the restaurant. Using the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation consumed a lot of energy. According to the rules of the cultivation world, Yan Qijuan paid a large amount of upper-grade energy stones as a toll fee, replenishing the consumption of the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation in Driftsnow City. After briefly registering their purpose of coming to Shui Yuan planet with the cultivators who were in charge of the formation, the group of people walked on the street excitedly, enjoying the exotic scenery of Driftsnow City. He Qianqiu stopped the girl and said with a smile, "Young lady, I'm he." Therefore, although Shui Yuan planet was a remote place, it had many old friends. There were several dozens of cities in Shui Yuan planet, as well as several hundred cultivator clans of various sizes. Although their overall strength was not strong, and the strongest elder in each clan only possessed a cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm, they might have 1, 2, or even 3 or 4 nascent divinity realm, or even heaven immortal realm as their son-in-law. Therefore, Shui Yuan planet had always been peaceful and stable, and rarely disturbed by any disturbances. Drift's Now city was located at the northernmost point of Shui Yuan planet, and was widely acknowledged as the largest city on the planet. It had a population of 500,000 people, and nearly 70,000 of them were cultivators. One day, a blinding light suddenly burst out from the grand universal teleportation formation that connected Drift's Now city to the outside world. Clad in a long black robe, Yan Qijuan walked out from the formation, escorted by Xiong Wanling and He Qianxiu, the 2 imperial advisors, and nearly 100 cultivators. He Qianxiu did not stand on ceremony. With a stride, he came before the girl, cupped his fist and bowed to her with a smile on his face. Ever since White Cloud Immortal Sect was stationed on Myriad Immortals planet, a few demon kings had fallen in love with this gesture. It was a very stylish gesture, especially when done by a demon king like He Qianxiu, who had the demeanor of a transcendent being. There were no powerful immortal sects or sects established on this planet. On this planet with the same size as Earth, there were only a few dozens of cities inhabited by itinerant cultivators. The total population was nearly 10 million, and the ratio of cultivators was very high. 1 out of every 10 people was a cultivator. On Shui Yuan planet, a cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm was more than enough for a cultivator to dominate a region, build his own city, and establish his own clan. If Wu Qi saw these 2 old demons, he would definitely think that they were his fellow cultivators. In the jargon of underhand sect, this kind of behavior was called treading on the plate. When treading on the plate, only then could they come in at night and loot all the good stuff. As these 2 old demons were treading on the plate with their divine will of nascent divinity realm, naturally, they could tread on the plate accurately, and nothing could escape from their furtive eyes. With an overall strength like this, they were more than capable of running amok on Shui Yuan planet. Xiong Wanling winked at He Qianxiu. He Qianxiu's cultivation technique was closer to the Taoist lineage, and with the help of this girl, his cultivation base would definitely advance at a tremendous pace. On Shui Yuan planet, there were only 4 grand universal teleportation formations that connected to the outside world, 1 in the south, 1 in the north, 1 in the east, and 1 in the west. Coincidentally, they were located in the 4 strongest cities in the 4 directions of Shui Yuan planet. When a girl, who looked very pretty and sweet, walked out from one of the taverns, waved at Yan Qijuan with a smile on her face, and invited them to dine in her taverns, Yan Qijuan's restless heart could no longer restrain the rippling desire of love. This girl, who was as gentle as a puddle of sweet water, had a very lovely appearance. Yan Qijuan felt that now was the time to have some fun. In Ji City, he was the crown prince of a dynasty, and it was very difficult for him to find an opportunity to indulge himself. But here, on Shui Yuan planet, what did it matter if he indulged in a few girls at the last minute? The girl rolled her eyes, and a bright gleam shot out from them. He Qianxiu, she cried out sternly. If they could secretly control Shui Yuan planet, it would mean that they could influence the attitude of those cultivators who were related to them by marriage through the various clans in the planet. This would be a great benefit to the future development of Great Yen in Liyuan Galaxy. Shockingly, the girl of Lin clan had already attained the cultivation base of peak-stage nascent divinity realm, and was only 1 step away from becoming a heaven immortal. The current situation of Lin clan in Shui Yuan planet was even more extraordinary. When the girl of Lin clan successfully overcame her heavenly tribulation and became a heaven immortal, it was unknown how prosperous Lin clan would become. Xiong Wanling and He Qianxiu, the 2 great nascent divinity imperial advisors, were scanning the entire sky with their divine will. They were investigating the overall strength of the cultivators in Snowflake City. Relying on their powerful divine will, from time to time, the 2 old demons swept their divine will across the racks of the shops along the street, as well as the storage rooms underneath the shops. They were secretly calculating the total value of these shops. A bright smile emerged on Yan Qijuan's face, and he nodded at these girls in a more amiable manner. He liked this place very much. He had decided that after Great Yan had secretly controlled Shui Yuan planet, he would definitely marry all these girls and bring them back to the palace. Stroking his smooth chin, Yan Qijuan thought to himself, "It seems like it has been over 10 years since I last had a son or daughter." A tall and skinny girl clad in a green outfit walked slowly toward them from the other end of the street. Her face was gloomy. Along the way, all the people of Snowflake City, whether they were ordinary people or cultivators, nodded and smiled at Yan Qijuan and his company, who were clad in luxurious clothes and had an extraordinary bearing. There were even some shop owners who walked out of their shops with smiles on their faces, greeting Yan Qijuan. Snowflake City was a hospitable city. Not only would these foreign cultivators bring a great amount of energy stones to purchase the spirit herbs and ores produced in the city, some of the elite disciples from immortal sects would even have a romantic relationship with the girls from some of the clans in Snowflake City. This was the best outcome. A beam of white light spilled out, as the girl's left palm turned into a blade and hacked towards Xiong Wanling. The smile on Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu's face grew brighter and brighter. In the two old demon kings' eyes, Snowflake City was a completely defenseless city. With just a casual grab, the entire city would be under their control. Of course, they could not act recklessly now. They had to wait for those monstrous figures in the imperial court, such as Su Qin and Han Fei, to come up with a proper plan. Only then could they make up their mind on how to attack Shui Yuan planet. Shui Yuan planet was located in a remote corner of Liyuan Galaxy, a planet where itinerant cultivators gathered. Over 1,000 years ago, Snowflake City was still a small and ordinary city. At that time, a girl from the largest clan in Snowflake City, Lin Clan, actually possessed the rare 9 meridians. As a result, she was spotted by the ancestral master of Liyuan Galaxy's Grand Martial Palace, a mighty heaven immortal, Immortal Changwu, who happened to be passing by, and he condescended to ask for her hand in marriage. As a result, Lin Clan rose to a meteoric rise within 1,000 years, and Snowflake City became one of the strongest cities in Shui Yuan planet. On top of that, all the girls here had an aura of elegance bursting out from between their brows, which made them very different from ordinary girls. Yan Qijuan ran his divine will through these girls. On average, 1 out of every 30 girls was suitable for cultivation, and their innate spirit root was not weak. Chapter 316. Although the girl looked skinny and tall, and did not have much strength, she actually possessed an incredible strength. He Qianqiu possessed the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm as well. Yet, when the girl thrust out her fist, it actually pierced through his chest and came out from his back, bringing a large amount of blood with it. He Qianqiu howled miserably in pain. Instinctively, he transformed back into his true form, a huge white crane with a wingspan of over 100 feet. With a shrill cry, he soared into the sky, opening his beak and sprinkling down a large sheet of green light. The green light was like rain, and the green light sprinkled down like a light drizzle in a spring night. However, these drizzling green lights came with a bone-piercing coldness, and their sharpness was comparable to lower-grade magical treasures. It was a divine ability that He Qianqiu had cultivated after a lifetime of painstaking cultivation, gathering a wisp of green cloud that contained gold element energies in the western sky. The green light transformed into rain, and the raindrops were as sharp as swords, all-pervasive, all-conquering, and incredibly powerful. He Qianqiu's cultivation technique was already very powerful, and during the past 3 years, he had obtained the legacy of White Cloud Immortal Sect's Energy Unity Technique. The Energy Unity Technique was an orthodox energy-cultivating scripture of Taoist sect, and it was best at stabilizing one's foundation and cultivating one's energy. After 3 years of painstaking cultivation, nearly half of He Qianqiu's demon aura had been removed, and the power of this prime divine ability had increased by 30%. As soon as the green light left its mouth, natural energies would attach themselves to it, strengthening its penetrative strength. The green light was like a living creature, chasing after the woman without letting go. But the girl was too fast. After wounding He Qianqiu with a single punch, before he could leap up into the sky, She had already arrived next to Xiong Wanling. The palm blade hacked viciously on Xiong Wanling's body, leaving a white beam in the air. A sound of bones breaking rang out, as Xiong Wanling's sturdy waist was cut about 1 foot deep by the girl. Blood splashed in all directions, and Xiong Wanling hissed and howled in pain. Just like He Qianqiu, he could not help but transform into his true form of a black-armored demon bear. Shockingly, he was a huge black bear, standing about 100 feet tall, fully covered in a 1-foot thick black scale armor, with dense black fur poking out from the gaps between the scales. The green-robed lady was caught unprepared. Her left hand was still stuck in Xiong Wanling's body. Xiong Wanling suddenly transformed back to his original form. His muscles tightened and clamped the lady's hand tightly, lifting her body up over 50 feet into the air. The girl's left hand was stuck in Xiong Wanling's muscles, hanging in the air 50 feet above the ground. A large sheet of green light burst out from He Qianqiu's mouth and smashed right onto the lady's body. A clear whistle came out of the woman's mouth, and a misty white mist spurted out from between her eyebrows. Silver liquid flowed along her skin, and in the blink of an eye, it condensed into a thin, tight armor on her body. The white soft armor was beautifully designed, and there were countless soybean-like bumps on its surface. At the top of each bump, there was a rune shining with a faint white light. The design of the talisman was simple and elegant, and it revealed a refined charm. It was very different from the talismans and restrictions that ordinary cultivators were familiar with. As the demon kings of Meng Mountains, Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu had inherited the related knowledge from generation to generation. As soon as they saw the shining runes, the two of them shouted at the same time, "Immortal runes! That is an immortal item!" The green light smashed forcefully onto the lady's body, causing the faint white glow on the armor's surface to produce countless ripples. Whenever the green light smashed onto the armor, it would produce a deep, muffled rumble that sounded like the rumbling of thunder. However, the lady did not budge, and the armor did not change at all. She sneered mockingly, then cried out in a deep voice, "Remember, I am Lin Qiulua." A bright white light shone from her left palm, as the silver liquid spread out quickly through her palm. At the edge of her palm, it transformed into a strangely shaped blade that was as thin as a piece of paper, 3 feet long and 1 palm wide. With a wave of her hand, Xiong Wanling's sturdy and strong body was instantly torn open by her saber, like a piece of tofu that was sliced by a steel saber. Wherever the saber passed through, the muscles, tendons, bones, scales, and long hairs were all cut off, while a large amount of blood sprayed out like a fountain. Xiong Wanling gave a miserable howl as he forcefully slapped Lin Qiulua's body with his bare paw, knocking her flying far away. Holding the huge wound that nearly cut his waist in half, he kept screaming and retreating at top speed. Fortunately, during the 3 years they spent in White Cloud Immortal Sect, although they were all Outer Sect disciples whom Patriarch Jiang Yun did not like, as the Myriad Immortals planet was too rich in natural resources, the welfare of all the disciples in White Cloud Immortal Sect had been improved at least 100 times. Therefore, Xiong Wanling also had some excellent life-saving immortal pills. He struggled to transform back into his human form, covering the wound with one hand and crushing a pale green jade bottle with the other, from which he took out a pale green pill that looked like a sprout. Immortal pills had their own spirits, and therefore, they could take the shape of anything under the heaven. Usually, immortal pills that looked like a sprout, or a seed were spirit pills that contained a tremendous life force, and could save lives in times of crisis. A clump of flame burst out from Xiong Wanling's palm. When the immortal pill touched the flame, it immediately transformed into a clump of pale green mist and wrapped around his body. The wound that was bleeding like a fountain was quickly healed. Xiong Wanling panted heavily, pointed his finger at Lin Qiulua, and howled, "Kill her!" Abruptly, Xiong Wanling's head transformed into a huge bear head. He opened his mouth and roared furiously, shooting out a beam of bright black light. Amidst the black light was a tiny double-edged battle axe, its crescent-shaped blade emitting a very strong and threatening gleam. Upon touching the wind, the battle axe enlarged at an incredible speed, and in just a blink of an eye, it had transformed into a huge axe that measured about 80 feet in length. Then, it swung down viciously towards Lin Qiuluo. She was knocked away by Xiong Wanling's palm. The armor worn by Lin Qiuluo was a treasure of immortal item grade, and although Xiong Wanling's palm was powerful enough to shatter a lofty mountain, it did not even leave a scratch on her defensive treasure. Lin Qiuluo sneered disdainfully when she saw the huge axe falling down from the sky with a jarring whistle. At the same time, both of her palms transformed into snow-white blades, and she waved them across the air. Two white beams slashed viciously onto the huge axe. A loud clang rang out, and the axe, which was a lower-grade magical treasure inherited by Xiong Wanling's ancestors, burst into sparks, and its handle was cut into two by Lin Qiuluo. Xiong Wanling's eyes went wide. He roared furiously, opened his mouth and coughed out a stream of blood. Lin Qiuluo was knocked off her feet by the tremendous force that came from the axe, and staggered back several thousand feet. Along the way, she went through several dozens of houses, bumping into a few unlucky fellows along the way, and their bodies were immediately shattered into pieces. Xiong Wanling stared blankly at the huge axe, which fell to the ground after its defensive treasure vanished completely. He felt a heartache and his heart was trembling. Demon cultivators were different from human cultivators. Although Xiong Wanling and his fellows had occupied a vast territory in Meng Mountains, they were not good at crafting items. As a result, this huge axe was a magical treasure left behind by their ancestors. Although he was the imperial advisor of Great Yan Dynasty, Xiong Wanling did not have any friendship with Mod, who was an expert in crafting items. It had been over 2,000 years, and he had never lowered his pride to ask Mod to craft a new magical treasure for him. Suddenly his ancestral treasure was destroyed in this place, and it made Xiong Wanling's eyes turn red. Roaring furiously, Xiong Wanling stamped his feet and transformed back into his bare form. He waved both hands, and the natural energies in the surroundings of Snowflake City began to tumble and flow into his body. Xiong Wanling roared furiously at Lin Qiuluo, who was retreating at top speed. "Bitch, I'm going to swallow you alive." Then he waved both of his huge bare palms, and two loud booms rang out. Two balls of dark light shot out from his palms, transforming into two huge and heavy palms that measured about 1 acre in circumference. They were accompanied by rolling demon thunder and pungent wind, thrusting towards Lin Qiuluo, who was retreating at top speed. It was the divine ability that Xiong Wanling was proud of, the mountain-shaking palms. When he struck with all his strength, every single palm strike could completely wipe out all the living beings within a radius of 1,000 miles. If the palm strikes were focused on a single point, even Jin Jia, who had the strongest fleshly body among the 5 demon kings, would not dare to resist Xiong Wanling's attack head-on. When the mountain-shaking palms were unleashed, 99% of the buildings in Snowflake City collapsed, and the common people in the city were either killed or wounded. Cultivators below nascent soul realm were shocked by the extremely powerful demon energy contained in the two palms, and their bodies exploded into blood and gore that sprayed in all directions. Xiong Wanling's reckless attack had nearly wiped out everything in Snowflake City. Suddenly, a thick layer of blood veins covered Lin Qiuluo's eyes. She threw her head back and roared furiously into the sky, "You bastard! How dare you destroy the foundation of Snowflake City?" Like a tigress that had gone mad, Lin Qiuluo curled up her body and greeted the mountain-shaking palms unleashed by Xiong Wanling. Hovering midair, Qianqiu, who had just consumed an immortal pill to heal his injuries, threw his head back and gave a long cry. His wings flapped rapidly, and his body began to spin like a top. With his long beak as the center, Qianqiu's body spun rapidly, leaving behind a grayish-white beam of light as he smashed towards Lin Qiuluo. A blinding light burst out from his beak, as he had gathered all his spirit, energy, and spirit into it. Just like Xiong Wanling, he had unleashed a full-force attack. Qianqiu's body spun rapidly, stirring the air within 100 miles around him, turning it into countless wind blades that swept across the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, the countless wind blades blotted the sky and smashed onto Snowflake City. In the vast Drift Snow City, other than over 10 residences that were protected by powerful formations, the other buildings were all destroyed. All the citizens in the city, other than those who were protected by the protective formations, were all shredded into mincemeat by the wind blades. A muffled boom rang out. Almost at the same time, Lin Qiulua was struck by two mountain-shaking palms, and the hazy white gleam emanating from her immortal armor dimmed. Although the immortal armor had an amazing defensive strength, Lin Qiulua's cultivation base was not strong enough to unleash its full power. At most, its defensive strength was about 2 times stronger than an upper-grade magical treasure. Xiong Wanling had even fused a part of his prime energy essence into the 2 palm strikes, giving them a power that was almost comparable to a casual strike from a 36th tier heaven immortal who had just transcended. Lin Qiulua's body trembled. The immortal armor had neutralized 80% of the power of Xiong Wanling's palm strikes, while the remaining 20% smashed onto her body. It nearly exploded all her internal organs, and blood sprayed out from her 7 apertures. Rapid creaking noises rang out. Qianqiu had exerted all his strength, using the toughest part of his beak as a weapon and mustering all his energy to launch the attack, which smashed brutally onto Lin Qiulua's back. The white gleam on the surface of the immortal armor shattered abruptly, as Qianqiu's beak smashed brutally onto the immortal armor. 2 miserable shrieks rang out almost at the same time, as a large sheet of blood sprayed out and stung one's eyes. Qianqiu's beak exploded completely, turning him into a bald white crane without a beak. He fell into a semi-conscious state and was knocked flying backward. Lin Qiulua coughed out another stream of blood. She spun a few times on the ground in a dizzy state, then sat down on the ground, unable to move anymore. Her immortal armor was still intact, and the full force attack from Qianqiu did not cause any actual damage to it. However, it had once again caused her internal organs to suffer a strong shock, and nearly killed her. Yan Qijuan, who was tightly protected by his followers, struggled to his feet. Pointing his finger at Lin Qiulua, he cried out fiercely, "Kill her! Hurry!" Since Lin Qiulua was protected by an immortal armor, it was obvious that she had an extraordinary background. If they did not seize the opportunity to kill her, who knew what other trump card she had? Several dozens of nascent soul guards shot out their sword beams at the same time, thrusting towards Lin Qiulua in a disorderly manner. However, an enormous divine will suddenly came crashing down from above, as 12 figures dove down from the sky at top speed. Like a pack of ferocious dragons, 12 nascent divinity cultivators roared furiously as they plunged down from the sky. What audacity! How dare you hurt Master's wife? Chapter 317. Amidst jarring cracking noises, the defensive formations of 7 mansions shattered with a loud boom. Tens of thousands of cultivators and mortals in each of the mansions, which occupied an area of several thousand acres, were turned into nothingness amidst the blood-red light. But, after the defensive formations of the 3 largest mansions were shattered, an immortal talisman suddenly flew out from each of them, hovering high above the mansions and holding back the surging blood-red light in the surroundings. Xiong Wanling believed that when he was at his peak condition, he could fight head-on against one peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator and any other cultivators, while Qianqiu could only barely handle one of them. And that was because both of them had a great advantage in this battle. Xiong Wanling had a very strong fleshly body, both in strength and defense, which far surpassed ordinary cultivators, while Qianqiu, who was in his true form of a white crane, had a great advantage in the sky. Lin Qiulua, who was chasing after them from behind, laughed hideously. She waved her hand and produced a shuttle-shaped golden magical treasure that was emanating a strong electric arc. Then she casually thrust it downwards, unleashing a 1-mile-thick electric arc straight down from the sky. Facing the electric arc that came smashing down from above, Yan Qijuan breathed out a long sigh. Clenching his jaws, he pulled out a jade pendant and crushed it forcefully. It was the mother-child pendant, which was carried by all members of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial clan. Once a member of Great Yan Dynasty went out and crushed the mother-child pendant, which was stored in the depths of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial palace, would shatter as well. With that, Great Yan imperial clan would know that a member of Great Yan Dynasty was in danger, and they could quickly organize a rescue team. Those nascent divinity cultivators dared not to be negligent and quickly used all their strength to keep up with Lin Qiulua. 3 peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators, fearing that Lin Qiulua would suffer any further harm, they formed a vague triangular formation and shielded her. The cultivator who stood at the front even spared no effort to consume his energy, as he raised up the huge round shield in front of him, breaking through the air and reducing the air resistance for Lin Qiulua. Staring at the enemies who were chasing after them menacingly, Xiong Wanling gave a furious roar. He opened his mouth and took a deep breath. Immediately, all the natural energies within 1,000 miles were sucked into his mouth, forming into a huge ball of light that shot out with a deafening rumble of thunder. The peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator snorted coldly. A large sheet of blinding light shone from his round shield, forcefully withstanding Xiong Wanling's thunderous attack. He Qianqiu gave a long and sonorous cry. Ignoring his cracked mouth and the blood all over his face, he flapped his huge wings and transformed into a beam of white light that shot forward. With one claw, he grabbed Xiong Wanling and Yan Qijuan. After that, he leaped 300 miles into the sky, turned into a white beam and fled into the distance in a sorry state. He Qianqiu used his divine will to scan through the grand universal teleportation formation, and found that it had been shut down by someone. Therefore, he had no choice but to find a way to survive in other places. Staying in Snowflake City would mean certain death. On the other hand, Lin Qiulua and her company, who had flown into a rage out of humiliation, had spared no expense in burning their blood essence to increase their flying speed. As a result, in just the time to finish a pot of tea, the enemies had caught up with Yan Qijuan and his company. When over 60 Earth Immortals of nascent soul realm exploded together, the power was enough to destroy everything within an area of 500 miles. On top of that, they had used a mystic technique to detonate all the energy stones they brought with them. As a wealthy cultivator of great yen, the amount of energy stones they brought with them was not a small number. Therefore, when an enormous amount of energy exploded at the same time, the power was incredibly strong. However, under the restriction of the Qin assassination formation, all the explosive force was concentrated within the area of Snowflake City, and not much of it leaked out. The few nascent divinity cultivators above them grinned coldly. A few sword beams shot down from the sky like long rainbows, killing all the demons and devils in just a blink of an eye. For a nascent divinity cultivator to kill an earth immortal of nascent soul realm was just like how a Jin Dan cultivator could kill a mortal. A peak-stage nascent soul earth immortal cried out fiercely, "Qin assassination." The first thunderbolt came smashing down and struck Yan Qijuan and his company, creating a huge pit about 100 miles deep on the snowfield. Among the 12 nascent divinity cultivators, 3 of them emanated an aura as strong as Lin Qiulua's. Obviously, they were peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators. What was even more unfortunate was that he had transformed into his true form and was flying in the sky. His long beak could break through the air, and it was a powerful weapon that aided him in flying. But now, his beak was destroyed, and he was flying in front of them with his round head. All the air resistance was exerted on his big head, which slowed down his flying speed by at least 30%. The nascent soul guards who accompanied Yan Qijuan cried out in shock, coughing out blood and falling back. Some of these guards were Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu's disciples, and all of them were demons and devils living in Meng Mountains. Looking at the peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators who were charging at them at top speed, the group of demon guards dashed forward fearlessly. On top of that, different from the immortal armors Lin Qiulua forcibly crafted with the help of others, the upper-grade magical armors worn by these 12 nascent divinity cultivators were their prime magical treasures, which they had cultivated with their own blood essence, flame, and life force. Therefore, they could use them freely and perfectly fused with their energies. Although their defensive strength was not as strong as Lin Qiulua's immortal armors, it was not far behind. Just now, when He Qianqiu and Xiong Wanling joined hands to attack Lin Qiulua, in a moment of desperation, He Qianqiu used the toughest part of his body, his beak, as a weapon. But the beak was not as tough as the immortal armors, and it shattered into pieces. His brain suffered a severe concussion, and he barely managed to retain a thread of consciousness, bringing Xiong Wanling and Yan Qijuan to flee. However, before he could run for more than 1,000 miles, his vision began to darken, and he felt a sharp pain in his brain, twitching and twitching. The frequency at which he flapped his wings became slower and slower. The 12 nascent divinity cultivators stared blankly at Lin Qiulua, and none of them dared to make a sound. With light bodies, the group of men pursued at an incredibly fast speed. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, the huge figure of He Qianqiu, who looked like he was about to fall, appeared in front of them. One of the peak stage nascent divinity cultivators answered, quickly pulling out 3 jade talismans and throwing them out. A series of rapid booms echoed out, as the 3 jade talismans transformed into 3 tiny sparks and shot towards the south. Like a mad woman, Lin Qiulua threw her head back and let out a few howls into the sky. Then she spun and transformed into a beam of white light, chasing towards the direction where He Qianqiu fled. Lin Qiulua threw a hysterical outburst, then her face turned cold as she cried out sternly, "Somebody, follow me and kill those 3 rascals. Pass down the snowflake order, ask all the grand universal teleportation formations in Shui Yuan planet to be shut down, and don't let those 3 rascals leave the planet. Ask Flying Snow City, White Frost City, and Snowdrift City to send out their city guards, and help Snowflake City hunt down those 3 damn things." A muffled boom rang out, as over 60 Earth Immortals, together with the formations constructed using their blood essence, and the enormous energies contained in all the energy stones they brought with them, exploded at the same time. A beam of blood-red light towered into the sky, enveloping the crumbling Snowflake City in a towering pillar of blood. A dozen mansions protected by defensive formations groaned as if they could not bear the heavy burden. Strong lights flickered and flickered above these mansions, as one restrictive formation after another was shattered by the blood-red light. Cries of terror and despair were heard coming from within the mansions. However, there were 12 nascent divinity cultivators here, and Lin Qiulua, who was protected by an immortal armor. What made Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu even more despairing was that the 12 nascent divinity cultivators were shrouded in towering murderous auras, and their eyes were gleaming with a ferocious gleam. Obviously, they were experts who had gone through hundreds of battles, and could not be compared with Lin Qiulua, who obviously did not have any battle experience. Lin Qiulua, with smoke billowing from her body, struggled out from the protective circle formed by 3 peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators while gasping for breath. She stared blankly at the completely destroyed Snowflake City, then threw her head back and screamed hysterically, "Yan Qijuan! Xiong Wanling! He Qianqiu! How dare you destroy my Snowflake City? I, Lin Qiulua, will fight you to the death! Bastard! Bastard! That damn bastard!" Before they could come up with a countermeasure, these Earth Immortals had already fished out a great amount of energy stones from their storage rings. Using a mystic technique, they stimulated the enormous energies in them and absorbed them into their bodies. Because of the impact of the enormous energies, their skin and muscles began to disintegrate and shatter. Blood splashed and splashed in all directions. However, under the control of an invisible force, a bizarre formation was formed under their feet. Lin Qiulua's pretty face turned pale, as big drops of tears kept rolling down from her eyes. 1 million upper-grade energy stones. Let me kill Yan Qijuan. He is just a mere Jin Dan human immortal. Why is he protected by nascent divinity cultivators? Why is he surrounded by so many nascent divinity guards who are willing to risk their lives? The light bombs exploded, shaking the void. Lin Qiulua and the others slowed down a little, but He Qianqiu's body swayed. His wings could no longer support him, and he brought Xiong Wanling and Yan Qijuan with him and plunged heavily towards the snowfield. Accompanied by a muffled boom, He Qianqiu and his company fell forcefully onto the snowfield, smashing into the ice and snow that never melted since the ancient times, creating a deep pit. A few bone-cracking noises could be heard coming from He Qianqiu's body, then he rolled his eyes and fainted. The lethality of the self-explosion only lasted for 3 breaths of time. Very soon, the blood-red light vanished, and the group of over 60 Great Yan's Imperial Guards had vanished without a trace. Their souls had dispersed, and the only thing left in Snowflake City were 3 lonely mansions perched on top of tall rock pillars. Apart from these 3 mansions and the rock pillars beneath them, the entire Snowflake City had become a huge pit that went 100 miles deep. This had allowed the self-explosion of these Earth immortals to unleash the strongest destructive force. On top of that, all of them were clad in heavy and dazzling armors. Vaguely visible runes could be seen hovering on the surface of the armors, emanating powerful ripples of magical power. Although they were not the immortal-grade magical treasures Lin Qiolua was wearing, they were still the best among all upper-grade magical treasures. After crushing the jade pendant, Yan Qijuan unleashed an upper-grade defensive magical treasure he always carried with him, the purple smoke tent. It transformed into a large sheet of purple mist and enveloped himself, Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu. 3 peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators landed right next to Lin Qiolua. Looking at the sword beams shot towards them from the nascent divinity cultivators who came with Yan Qijuan, one of them snorted coldly and said, "Ignorant." He leaned his body forward, and a huge round shield appeared out of nowhere before him. Holding the shield with all his strength, he dashed forward at full speed. Several dozens of sword beams smashed onto the shield, but were shattered by the electric arcs that suddenly burst out from its surface. Chapter 318. A dead silence reigned in the private room. Apart from Duke of Long Yang's beloved concubine, spies from other dynasties soon arrived and reported the same information. Wu Qi lightly tapped the surface of the round table with his fingers as he glanced at the representatives of the 6 dynasties. "Does anyone have any objection to the ownership of Gu Tai dynasty?" Wu Qi smiled amiably. Placing both hands on the table, Wu Qi said softly, "If no one has any objection, then it's settled." No one had any objection. After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi cupped his fist at Duke of Longyang and said, "My lord, I'll leave the matter of supporting Li Yifeng to ascend to the throne. The crown prince of Great Yen was attacked. No matter whether he is dead or alive, I must go and have a look." The graceful Duke of Longyang rose to his feet, bowed to Wu Qi with a smile on his face and said, "It is an easy task. However, Duke of Tunyun owes me a favor." Wu Qi nodded and said, "I'll return the favor." Without saying another word, Wu Qi rose to his feet and left Hidden Sword Pavilion together with Yen Bugui. Li Feng was about to follow Wu Qi out of the door, but Duke of Longyang pressed him back to his seat. Duke of Longyang giggled and said, "The new emperor of Gu Tai dynasty cannot leave at this critical moment. Why don't you come and pay your respects to the emperor of Gu Tai dynasty?" Duke of Longyang gave Lao Ai and the others a glare. Lao Ai, Tian Dan, and the others remained motionless, while the 8 princes behind them walked forward helplessly, kneeling before Li Yifeng with their jaws clenched tightly. Li Yifeng stared blankly at the 8 princes kneeling before him. Had he become the emperor just like that? The succession of the imperial power was decided by these people with just a word. Li Yifeng felt he was dreaming. Only Zi Qinyan's eyes were clear, and she held her head up calmly, looking down at these once arrogant nobles kneeling on the ground. Wu Qi walked hastily out of Hidden Sword Pavilion and said to Yen Bugui in a low voice, "Seal the news. We can let everyone under the heaven know that the crown prince was attacked, but we can't let Zhang Li know. Remember, do not let Zhang Li know about this. Also, tell His Majesty and all the lords that the people from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect must never know that Crown Prince was attacked on Shuiyuan planet. Otherwise, no one will know that the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation was constructed." Yen Bugui's face tensed up. He grabbed Wu Qi's hand and said, "Are you going to Shuiyuan planet alone? It's too dangerous. Let's wait." Wu Qi shook Yen Bugui off and cried out coldly, "Wait for Great Yen to send reinforcements? Too slow." Gnashing his teeth, Wu Qi shook his head, sighed, and said, "No matter what, he is Zi Xian's father. I can't just leave him alone in Shuiyuan planet. I'll go back and tell young master what happened here, and ask him to secretly dispatch the elite private army of Little Meng City to Tai City to protect Li Yifeng and Zi Qinyan. Just in case someone jumps over the wall in desperation, Ask young master to come here in person and ask for help from the heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect. Yen Bugue kept Wu Qi's words in his mind, then answered without hesitation. Wu Qi nodded his head and took a deep breath. In the past few years, he had been secretly accumulating his own strength. Now that things had come to a head, he could finally mobilize his own strength and connections. Otherwise, when Wu Qi rushed to Shui Yuan planet to rescue Yan Qijuan, he would definitely leave Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan behind as he did not have enough strength. By the time he returned from that place, perhaps both of them would have been eaten by someone. Coldly glancing to the left and right, Wu Qi suddenly saw Xiang Yu approaching slowly from the end of the long street on a black horse, holding a crimson tiger-headed halberd in his hand. Wu Qi could not help but curse angrily. Hastily, he transformed into a dark beam and sped away. The speed of the acquired magnetic sword beam was extremely fast. In just a blink of an eye, Wu Qi had traveled several hundred miles away. Although Xiang Yu had the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm, he was caught unprepared by Wu Qi. Holding the tiger-headed halberd in his hand, he stared furiously at the direction where Wu Qi had disappeared. Clenching his teeth, he cried out, "Little thief! You will die under my halberd." At the end of the long street, a red shadow flickered. Clad in a long red dress, Yu Ji appeared out of nowhere like a ghost with both hands tucked under her sleeves. She stood quietly on the top of a pavilion and looked in the direction where Wu Qi had disappeared. From time to time, she would look at Xiang Yu, and from time to time, she would look at the direction where Wu Qi had disappeared. Her pretty face was expressionless, as if she was a walking corpse. Shrouded in a dark beam, fearing that Duke of Longyang and Yen Bugue would make a mistake, Wu Qi returned to Myriad Immortals planet through White Cloud planet's teleportation formation. Stealthily, he sent a message to Lu Chengfeng, Lord Xianxing, and the people around him with a jade talisman. After making all the necessary arrangements, he returned to White Cloud planet. Smiling, Wu Qi exchanged a few pleasantries with the executing disciples of White Cloud planet's Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. Smiling, he mocked himself, saying that he had a busy life, running back and forth for the sake of Jiang Qingzi's mission. Amidst the flattering laughter of those executing disciples, Wu Qi rode a cloud and flew towards the direction of Gutai dynasty. After that, he found a desolate place and stopped. With a stomp of his foot, Wu Qi plunged into the ground, his body glinting with a yellow light. In just a blink of an eye, he had gone 300 miles underground. Hiding in a solid rock stratum, Wu Qi's eyes flickered with a bright gleam. Under the control of his innate earth element energy essence, the sand, soil, and rock stratum around him began to ripple like water. With a thought in Wu Qi's mind, the surrounding stratum began to spread out rapidly, and eventually transformed into a circular cave, about 1 mile in diameter and several hundred feet in height. From his storage ring, Wu Qi took out a large number of pre-made formation discs and placed them on the ground. Very quickly, he assembled the foundation of the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. After putting all the discs together and embedding them with large pieces of supreme-grade energy stones, Wu Qi activated the formation. Countless streams of light rushed out from the formation discs, forming into 9 layers of triangular formations above the formation. At the core of the formation, which was formed by the bright lights, Wu Qi embedded large pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold and supreme-grade energy stones. Wu Qi bit his fingertip and dripped a drop of his blood essence onto the formation discs. After that, Wu Qi activated the formation and refined the blood essence, then branded a thread of his divine will at the core of the formation. With that, the formation had become his personal Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. Unless someone had a divine will that could pierce through the vast void and travel from one planet to another, and had the ability to shatter the void and search for the energy ripples of a teleportation formation in the boundless void, no one would be able to modify the setup of this teleportation formation, and no one would be able to use it. In other words, if someone possessed such a formidable strength, and could travel across the void with his fleshly body, why would he need a teleportation formation? After finishing all the cumbersome setup, Wu Qi activated the formation and injected the coordinates of the Dark Radiance star into it. A blinding light burst out from the teleportation formation. Wu Qi walked into the formation and vanished in a blink of an eye. An enormous pressure came pressing down from all directions. With a twist of his left wrist, a large sheet of yellow light burst out from the wrist shield and enveloped his entire body, completely neutralizing the enormous pressure caused by the grand universal teleportation. Less than an hour later, Wu Qi walked out from the largest public teleportation formation in Dark Radiant Star. According to the fixed price in Liyuan Galaxy, Wu Qi paid a huge sum of energy stones to the cultivator who managed the teleportation formation. After that, he inquired about the location of the largest market in the vicinity. After that, Wu Qi stepped on a sword beam and flew towards the market. Dark Radiant Star and Shui Yuan planet were located in the same planetary system, orbiting around the same star. It was the closest planet to Shui Yuan planet where cultivators gathered. The geographical distance between the two planets was almost equal to the distance between Earth and Mars. According to the information obtained by Duke of Longyang just now, when Yan Qijuan was attacked in Shui Yuan planet, all 4 teleportation formations were shut down. If Wu Qi wanted to rescue Yan Qijuan, he would have to go through Dark Radiant Star. Wu Qi had no idea if Yen Dan and the others could find a way to travel across the space of over 100 million miles between Dark Radiant Star and Shui Yuan planet, but Wu Qi knew that he could only get himself a planetary ship from Dark Radiant Star to reach Shui Yuan planet. A planetary ship was a rare item in the entire Liyuan Galaxy. Even though White Cloud Immortal Sect was considered one of the strongest immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy, they did not have many planetary ships. Although Dark Radiant Star was a planet inhabited by cultivators, and there were 2 large cultivator clans stationed here, it was still a problem to find a planetary ship. If he could not find a planetary ship in Dark Radiant Star within 12 hours, Wu Qi would have to rush to the largest trading planet in Liyuan Galaxy, the Thousand Waves Star, and try his luck. It would only take him less than an hour to travel from White Cloud Planet to Dark Radiant Star through the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, but it would take him 2 days and 6 hours to travel from White Cloud Planet to the Thousand Waves Star, which was located at the border between Liyuan Galaxy and a neighboring galaxy. Yan Qijuan was in grave danger, and Wu Qi could not afford to waste his time. Riding on the sword beam and flying at high speed in the sky, the muscles on Wu Qi's face slowly changed, gradually turning into a strange face. His clothes flickered and transformed into an ordinary gray Taoist robe, and all the ornaments on his body had turned ordinary as well. At first glance, he looked like an inconspicuous itinerant cultivator. The energies in his body transformed, and the strange sign of Jin Dan behind Wu Qi's back had turned into a sheet of blue ripples. Outside the Huixian market, the market closest to the largest public teleportation formation in Dark Radiant Star, Wu Qi pressed down on the sword beam. Casting a glance at the market, which occupied an area of tens of miles in circumference, with rows upon rows of roofs and eaves, and a thriving population, Wu Qi grabbed a cultivator of early-stage nascent soul realm who was passing by and said, "Fellow Taoist, may I know where the largest and most complete trading house in Huixian market is?" The nascent soul Earth Immortal, who was grabbed by the collar by Wu Qi as if he was grabbing a chicken, glared at Wu Qi angrily. He cast a glance at the strange sign of Jin Dan behind Wu Qi's back. How could a mere middle-grade Jin Dan cultivator be so rude to him, an Earth Immortal of nascent soul realm? While the Earth Immortal was about to scold Wu Qi, he suddenly realized that he had a cultivation base of nascent soul realm, and the strength and reflexes possessed by his Earth Immortal Dharma body were at least 10 times stronger than those of Jin Dan human immortals. Yet, how could Wu Qi grab him so easily, and he did not even have the slightest ability to resist? In the world of cultivators, those who were strong would live, while those who were weak would die. Those who offended others recklessly and blindly would die as fast as they could. Immediately, a big smile bloomed on the Earth Immortal's face. Allowing himself to be lifted up by Wu Qi, he said obediently, "Senior, the largest trading house in Huixian market is, of course, the Treasure Collection Tower, jointly run by Clan Feng and Clan Yu, the two largest immortal clans in Dark Radiant Star. Looking from here about 1 mile away, it is the tallest skyscraper made from pale green jade. Rolling his eyes, Wu Qi casually tossed the man aside, then fished out several dozens of upper-grade energy stones from his sleeve and threw them over to the man. The Earth Immortal gladly took over the upper-grade energy stones. With a big smile on his face, he looked at Wu Qi's back as he walked into the market, murmuring under his breath, "TSK, which sect is this prodigal son from? Over 50 upper-grade energy stones, that's more than enough for me to spend for a few years." Upon hearing the man's murmur, Wu Qi could not help but sigh with mixed emotions once again. The cultivators in Liyuan Galaxy were indeed extremely poor. With a sway of his feet, he crossed a distance of 1,000 feet with just a blink of an eye. Exercising the ground-shrinking divine ability, Wu Qi came to the entrance of Treasure Collection Tower in just 2 to 3 steps. He strode into the Treasure Collection Tower, which was luxuriously decorated and exuded a worldly air of wealth and honor. With a deep voice, he cried out, "Where is the manager? Do you have a planetary boat for sale? I'll buy it with a high price." Everyone in Treasure Collection Tower turned to look at him. A manager, whose body was as fat as a ball, greeted him with a big smile on his face. Chapter 319. The shopkeeper hurriedly smiled and said, My apologies. My status is too low, and my authority is limited. That's why I can't discuss the trade of such precious treasures with you. Please come upstairs, let our head shopkeeper receive you personally." Then he reached out his hand and led Wu Qi to the innermost staircase of Treasure Tower, bowing with every step he took, and brought Wu Qi to the innermost staircase. Wu Qi gritted his teeth and flew towards the outskirts of the city. Wu Qi frowned and gave Feng Bailing an impatient glance. Then he said one word at a time, "I told you, it's a good treasure, name your price. I have no interest in the conflict of interests between your two clans, or the cause and effect of this planetary ship." Impatiently, Wu Qi said in a cold voice, "Head shopkeeper Feng, doing business is nothing more than handing over the goods at the same time. It's useless even if you want to know my background, as I'm not here to rob you. With your cultivation base of early-stage nascent divinity realm, do you think you're afraid of me, a mere mid-stage Gene Dan human immortal? Give me the planetary ship, and I'll give you enough energy stones or something else in exchange. Then the deal is done, isn't it?" The middle-aged Taoist took over the dark crow, grinned, and said in an indifferent tone, "It's not bad. It just so happens that I lack a planetary ship to travel through the starry sky. This dark crow is not bad." The third floor of Treasure Tower was clean and spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows on both sides. Through the windows, one could overlook the mountains in the distance, through which one could see the beautiful scenery. In the spacious space, there were a few simple and exquisite display cabinets, inside of which there were a few jewels that were placed as a facade. Wu Qi gave these few dazzling treasures a quick glance, and lost interest in them. All of them were merely decorations, and their value was probably not even worth a single energy stone. The young man, Yu Song, was stunned, and so was the middle-aged Taoist. Dark Crow was worth 3 million upper-grade energy stones? Wu Qi, a mere Gene Dan cultivator, had actually given out so many spirit stones without batting an eyelid? Yu Song glanced at Wu Qi, while the middle-aged Taoist scrutinized Wu Qi from head to toe. Wu Qi's face darkened. He looked at Feng Bailing, who was holding the 3 storage pouches, and shouted coldly, "Manager!" This poor Taoist paid the full amount of 3 million upper-level spirit stones according to the price you offered. What do you mean by this? Does your treasure collection tower also do robberies? The treasure collection tower had a total of 3 floors. The first floor sold some ordinary lower-grade magical items, spirit talismans, and spirit pills. The second floor sold magical treasures and weapons, and if one was lucky enough to find a good source of supply, one could even find upper-grade magical treasures. The third floor was the core of the entire treasure collection tower, where all the items sold were rare natural treasures. Every few days, there would be a spirit item on the third floor. Even if it was a mediocre spirit item, it was, after all, a spirit item that had the ability to protect its owner and attack its own sentience. A few men dressed in Taoist robes were standing at the entrance, and the one who attacked was a young man in his 20s, who looked so proud and arrogant that his nose almost reached the sky. The man retracted the bright beam and grabbed tightly onto Dark Crow. Without even looking at Wu Qi, he turned to Feng Bailing and said with a smile, "Uncle Feng Jiao, I heard that Treasure Collection Tower is selling a supreme-grade planetary ship, and my master is very interested in it. That's why I came here just to have a look." Wu Qi rolled his eyes, gave Feng Bailing a glance, and said in a cold voice, "I call myself Greed, but head manager, you can call me Taoist Greed. I presume head manager already knows the purpose of my visit. It just so happens that Treasure Collection Tower has a planetary ship, and that's for the best. You don't have to send this treasure to Thousand Waves Star. I'm willing to buy it at a high price." Nodding, Wu Qi glanced at the people in the lobby on the first floor, and only when he didn't find anyone unsightly did he go up the stairs. A secret door in the corner of the third floor opened, and two graceful and good-looking women walked out, carrying a large jade tray in their hands. The jade plate was as thin as a cicada's wings, and not even the slightest decorative pattern could be seen on it. However, it was wreathed in a faint, cyan mist, which made the starboat, which was around 3 feet and 2 inches long and was exquisitely made. The starboat was entirely dark golden in color, and was releasing wisps of warm light from time to time, making it look extraordinarily magnificent. Feng Bailing smilingly cupped his fist and bowed to Wu Qi, then extended his hand and invited Wu Qi to sit on a soft couch. After sizing up Wu Qi for a while, Feng Bailing chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoist Greed, this title? Hee, I suppose it's your first time coming to our Dark Radiant Star, right? Among all the famous cultivators in the entire Dark Radiant Star, there is no one I don't know." Before the manager, who was as fat as a ball, could say anything, Wu Qi had already pressed his hand on the manager's fair and greasy face. Staring coldly at the manager, who was a head shorter than him, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Cut the crap, I just want a planetary ship. Have it, or don't have it. If you have it, I'll buy it with a high price. If not, I'll turn and leave right away." "Cut the crap, I'm in a hurry." Feng Bailing cried out in a deep voice, "Taoist Xian, this fellow Taoist Greed is a distinguished guest of Treasure Tower." With a sway of his body, he came before Wu Qi and shielded him from the spiritual pressure unleashed by Taoist Xian. Feng Bailing sprung to his feet abruptly and shouted at the young man, "Yu Song, what are you doing? This planetary ship has been sold to this customer." Yu Song gave Taoist Xian a meaningful glance. Taoist Xian laughed, strode next to Wu Qi, and solemnly handed over Dark Crow to Wu Qi. Smilingly, he looked at Wu Qi and said, "Fellow Taoist Greed? The journey to the stars is long, and I wish you a safe journey." Right after he walked out of Treasure Tower's front door, Wu Qi heard footsteps coming from behind. Taoist Xian and Yu Song, together with a few men clad in Taoist robes, followed closely behind Wu Qi. Just as Wu Qi was flying towards the outskirts of Huixian Market on a sword beam, the group of men had caught up to him without any disguise. Clapping his hands, Wu Qi praised, "What a good treasure! Name your price." The Taoist smiled faintly, nodded, and said, "Fellow Taoist, my name is Xian, an elder of Star Dragon sect. May I know which sect you come from, and which immortal is your master?" With a smile on his face, Taoist Xian subconsciously unleashed the pressure of his mid-stage nascent divinity divine will towards Wu Qi. Taking a deep breath, Feng Bailing showed 3 fingers to Wu Qi, then said through clenched teeth, "It was not easy to get this Dark Crow. It took both Feng clan and Yu clan a great price to get it. 3 million upper-grade energy stones, that's the lowest discount price." He looked at Wu Qi and said, "It is indeed a little expensive, but fellow Taoist must know that the materials used to build a planetary ship are incalculable, not to mention." Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, the smile on Feng Bailing's face grew wider, and a faint gleam shone from his eyes. Instantly, Wu Qi's heart tightened. The manager of this treasure tower was actually an early-stage nascent divinity cultivator. Judging from this, the two great immortal clans that controlled Treasure Tower, Feng Clan and Yu Clan, did not have a weak background. Wu Qi reached out his hand and said to the middle-aged Taoist with a cold grin, "Fellow Taoist, please return my dark crow to me." Feng Bailing paused for a moment, then gave Wu Qi a grumpy look. He had been in charge of Treasure Tower for nearly 1,000 years, but he had never seen someone as unreasonable as Wu Qi. If not for the fact that he was a customer, Feng Bailing would have long grabbed his neck and thrown him out. Before Feng Bailing could finish his words, Wu Qi had already fished out 3 storage bags and threw them towards him. With a deep voice, Wu Qi cried out, "Count them! 3 million upper-grade energy stones, not a single one less. Dark Crow? I can take it with me now." Wu Qi fixed his eyes on the planetary ship, then quickly sent out his divine will. It was a very good one, at least 3 times better than Jiangqing Zi's shadow cloud. According to the standard of planetary ships, which were categorized as Star Region, Heaven Realm, and Universe Realm, this dark gold planetary ship should be considered as one of the best among all Star Region grade planetary ships. Although it was still not strong enough to travel around minor heavenly circle realm, when traveling in Liyuan Galaxy, it was no different from an ordinary human traveling on a flying sword on the surface of a planet. Reverently, he presented the planetary ship to a middle-aged man in his 40s, who was equally arrogant and looked down on everyone in the world. The young man smiled and said respectfully, "Master, do you like this planetary ship? Master, if you like it, I'd like to give it to you. According to the rules of Treasure Tower, the treasures bought by both our clans will be provided at cost price." Wu Qi did not say a word. He took over Dark Crow and shoved it into the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, then left Treasure Tower without saying a word. Weighing the 3 storage bags in her hand, Feng Bailing frowned and said, "Fellow Taoist, greed has paid for the goods. According to the rules, this Dark Crow belongs to fellow Taoist greed now. Taoist Yi Xian, please don't break the rules of Treasure Tower. This is a business jointly run by Feng Clan and Yu Clan, and the reputation of over 10,000 years cannot be tarnished." Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, are you trying to rob my treasures?" The innkeeper was struck dumb. With both hands pressed on his bulging belly, he gave Wu Qi a deep bow of about 3 degrees or 5 degrees with great difficulty. He smiled and said, "You've come at the right time, sir. Half a year ago, Treasure Tower did manage to obtain an upper-grade planetary ship by chance. Initially, we were planning to send it to Thousand Waves Star and sell it at a good price during the Rare Treasures Conference that is held once every 100 years. But now, there are still over 3 years before the Rare Treasures Conference. Since you want it?" With a deep voice, Wu Qi cried out, "Name your price." What was even rarer was the fact that this planetary ship actually had 360 layers of defensive formations. Compared to Jiangqing Zi's shadow cloud, which only had a few dozen layers of defensive formations, it was at least 10 times more. Its defensive power was also more than 100 times stronger. This was definitely the best vehicle for traveling within the star field and traveling in the void. Feng Bailing stared blankly at Wu Qi. He didn't expect Wu Qi to say something like that without hesitation. He pondered for a brief moment, then said slowly, "Fellow Taoist has a keen insight, so of course you can tell this is a good item." Even the treasure collection pavilion didn't have a star boat like this. It's just that this planetary ship is too precious, and no matter which of the 2 owners of Treasure Tower owns it, it will hurt the relationship between the 2 families. That's why I decided to sell it. Feng Bailing was stunned. Out of the habit of a businessman, he wanted to know more about Wu Qi's background. But he didn't expect that Wu Qi would be so impatient that he couldn't even wait for a few words. Looking at Wu Qi's tense face, as well as the faintly discernible coldness in his words, Feng Bailing gave a bitter smile and clapped his hands. An old man, clad in a long green robe, was sitting on a soft couch on the 3rd floor, with an ancient yellow scroll in his hand, swaying his head and reading a poem. Upon hearing Wu Qi's footsteps, the old man hurriedly dropped the scroll, walked up to him with a hearty smile and said, "An honorable guest has come to visit. Please forgive me for not welcoming you earlier. I'm Feng Bailing. May I know your name, honorable guest?" Rising to his feet, Wu Qi reached out his hand to grab Dark Crow, which was sitting on the jade tray. But unexpectedly, a bright beam of light darted over from a side and slammed into Wu Qi's palm. Wu Qi hastily retracted his hand. Along with a shrill whistling sound, the bright beam made 3 revolutions around the jade tray, then suddenly carried Dark Crow and flew towards the entrance of the 3rd floor. Chapter 320. 10 miles away from Huixian Market, Wu Qi was surrounded by Taoist Yi Xian, Yu Song, and 5 men in Taoist robes. Taoist Yi Xian assumed the bearing of a grandmaster. With both hands clasped behind his back, he raised his head and looked at the gray sky. A faint smile could be seen on his face as he looked at the rolling dark clouds. Meanwhile, Yu Song and the 5 men had their eyes fixed on Wu Qi, as if they were a pack of hungry wolves who had just seen a fat piece of meat. Their eyes were filled with a strong greed and desire. Clearing his throat, Yu Song turned to Wu Qi and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist greed, please tell us your sect, and which senior immortal is your master. If you are on good terms with Dragon Yellow sect, you are free to leave, but you must not make a mistake. Fellow Taoist, please tell us your background as soon as possible." With a gloomy face, Wu Qi stared coldly at the group of people who surrounded him. Taoist Yi Xian possessed the cultivation base of middle-stage nascent divinity realm, while the other 5 men in Taoist robes, except for 2 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators and Yu Song, were all human immortals of Jin Dan realm. Taoist Yi Xian stood 100 feet away from Wu Qi, assuming the bearing of a mighty senior. His entire body was relaxed, as if he did not put up any guard at all. He had even restrained his divine will and was only using his naked eyes to observe the changing clouds and mists above his head, giving him the bearing of a mighty man. The 2 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators were smiling as well, looking at Wu Qi disdainfully. They did not take Wu Qi seriously at all. He was just a tiny middle-stage Jin Dan human immortal, so there was no need for them to guard against him. Just like Taoist Yi Xian, they had also assumed the bearing of a mighty man. On the contrary, Yu Song and the other 3 Jin Dan Taoists had their eyes fixed on Wu Qi, putting all their attention on Wu Qi. A bright gleam shone around them, as if they were ready to attack at any time. Shaking his head, Wu Qi was about to say something when suddenly, a faint, almost inaudible noise was heard coming from 1,000 feet away. Wu Qi's ears twitched. He turned to look in the direction of Huixian Market and cried out coldly, "Is that Manager Feng bailing? Since you're here, why don't you come out and have a talk?" With an awkward cough, Feng Bailing appeared in the air with her hands behind her back. He looked at Wu Qi and nodded with a smile. "Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist greed. I'm only here to find out the background of your sect." Rolling her eyes, Feng Bailing chuckled and said, 3 months ago, a batch of spirit stones was stolen from our treasure house's storehouse, totaling more than 7 million high-grade spirit stones. This is the painstaking accumulation of our Feng and Yu clans for many years. Such a loss is truly regrettable. Today, you suddenly showed up and spent 3 million high-grade spirit stones to purchase a starboat that cultivators of the Jin Dan realm can't pilot. It's really amazing. Wu Qi nodded and said, "So, I stole your treasure collection tower's spirit stones?" Feng Bailing smiled faintly and turned back to look at Huixian Market 10 miles away. She said indifferently, "It's not impossible. Nephew Yu Song, please don't fight here. If you alarm the people in the market, it will harm the reputation of Treasure Collection Tower." Nodding slowly, Wu Qi said indifferently, "Oh, initially I just wanted to buy a starboat and rescue someone. But since you insist on giving me some trouble, I don't mind wasting some time to teach you Feng and Yu clans a lesson. Judging from Yu Song's behavior, I can tell how your clans are taught. Jackals of the same lair. What a bunch of lowly bastards." Feng Bailing's face darkened when he heard Wu Qi's harsh words. He snorted coldly and was about to say something, but Wu Qi did not give him the chance to do so. A beam of purple light shot out from Wu Qi's left wrist. Amidst a strange whistling noise that could shake one's soul, the spirit-restricting rope sped across the sky, transforming into 4 huge light dragons and leaped onto Taoist Yi Xian, Feng Bailing, and the two earth immortals of nascent soul realm. Taoist Yi Xian, who was pretending to be a mighty expert, was caught off guard by the spirit-restricting rope. Before he could react, it had already tightly wrapped around his entire body. Taoist Yi Xian felt his body go numb, and his eyes went blank as he was frozen on the spot. Feng Bailing and the two earth immortals of nascent soul realm, whose cultivation base was weaker than Taoist Yi Xian, were in an even worse situation. Feng Bailing was still fine, as he was only frozen on the spot. But the two nascent soul cultivators could not withstand the frightening aura unleashed by the spirit-restricting rope, and their nascent souls disintegrated on the spot. Amidst a shrill wolf howl, the sword of Greedy Wolf flew out and pierced through the bodies of the two earth immortals with a dark beam, absorbing all the energy essence and blood essence of their disintegrated nascent souls. The sword of Greedy Wolf shone brightly, as 7 wolf heads emerged abruptly, splitting into 2 dark beams and piercing through the foreheads of Taoist Yi Xian and Feng Bailing. The sword beams pierced through their nascent divinities, turning them into enormous soul particles and pure energies, disintegrating and disintegrating. The sword of Greedy Wolf let out a joyful wolf howl, crazily absorbing all the energy essence of the two nascent divinity cultivators. It was the first time the sword of Greedy Wolf tasted the delicious blood essence of a nascent divinity cultivator. Suddenly, a large sheet of dark light burst out from the sword, which was refined by Wu Qi with a mystic technique. The 7 wolf heads suddenly converged inwardly, then quickly expanded outwards. Shockingly, there were 14 wolf heads hovering in the sky. The spiritual connection between the sword of Greedy Wolf and Wu Qi had become much closer, and Wu Qi could clearly sense the joy and excitement of the sword of Greedy Wolf. Smiling pleasantly, Wu Qi understood that after the sword of Greedy Wolf had devoured all the energy essence of the two nascent divinity cultivators, it had evolved to a higher level, and had truly formed a thread of sentience that belonged solely to the sword of Greedy Wolf. It had truly become a spirit item. Slowly, the spirit-restricting rope transformed into a purple beam and shrunk back into Wu Qi's wrist. A clear divine sense was transmitted into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. The spirit-restricting rope could help Wu Qi deal with Taoist Yi Xian and Feng Bailing, and it could also reluctantly help Wu Qi deal with the two unlucky nascent divinity cultivators. However, if he wanted the spirit-restricting rope, a mighty immortal item, to help Wu Qi deal with Yu Song and the other Jindan cultivators, even if Wu Qi were to tear the rope into pieces, he would never do something so shameless. Shrugging his shoulders, Wu Qi summoned the sword of Greedy Wolf back. A beam of black light shot out from it, bringing with it 14 wolf heads that were also emanating a cold, dark gleam, flying and dancing around Wu Qi at top speed. 4 dried corpses that were drained by the sword of Greedy Wolf fell heavily to the ground. The deep, muffled thuds awakened Yu Song and the 3 Taoists. Before Wu Qi could say anything, the knees of Yu Song and the 3 Taoists had turned soft. They dropped to their knees and kowtowed repeatedly. "Senior, we were wrong. We were blind and had offended Senior. Please spare our lives, Senior." Yu Song's cries were very shrill and miserable, as if he was a little girl who was about to be raped. His face was covered with tears and snot. Before Wu Qi could say anything, he and the 3 Taoists had already raised their heads and began to slap their faces forcefully. One slap after another, every slap was heavy and crisp. In just a few breaths of time, their faces had swelled up, and then the skin on their faces broke. Their mouths were split open, and blood kept dripping down from the corners of their mouths. Wu Qi sneered. He came next to Taoist Yi Xian, reached out his hand and searched his body, pulling out all the belongings he had left behind. 2 storage rings, a Taoist robe of upper-grade magical treasure level, 2 jade pendants engraved with defensive formations, and a foot-long dagger that kept pulsating in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. The dagger, which was as white as jade, was filled with a spirit energy, and vaguely, it had given birth to a thread of its own sentience. Although its master was dead, the dagger actually seemed to turn into a beam of light and fly away. Hastily, Wu Qi grabbed the dagger and shoved it into the sword of Greedy Wolf. A dark gleam flashed out from the sword of Greedy Wolf, devouring the dagger in just a blink of an eye, leaving only some useless metal powder drifting down slowly. After looting all the belongings from Taoist Yi Xian, Feng Bailing, and the two Earth Immortals, Wu Qi found 2 storage rings and 2 storage bags. Just like what happened to Jiang Qingzi years ago, these 2 Earth Immortals only had a storage bag with them. Apart from the 3 million upper-grade energy stones Wu Qi paid for the planetary ship just now, he only found a little over 24,000 upper-grade energy stones from the 2 nascent divinity cultivators and the 2 nascent soul cultivators. Poor, so poor that it was tinkling. They were nascent divinity cultivators. Wu Qi shook his head and transferred all the belongings into the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. After that, he took out a thread of heavenly silk, and just like what he did many years ago, he strung the 2 storage rings together and hung them around his neck. After that, without uttering a single word, he thrust the sword out and chopped off 4 heads. The Dantian of Yusong and the other 3 Earth Immortals was pierced through, and Jin Dan was completely shattered. The 14 wolf heads of the sword of Greedy Wolf rushed up, devouring the energy of Jin Dan and the souls of the 4 Earth Immortals. Vaguely, the dark gleam on the sword grew brighter. Wu Qi raised his head and gave Huixian Market a glance. Without hesitation, he transformed into a beam of dark light and sped towards Huixian Market at full speed. Before the people in Treasure Tower could react, and before they could activate the defensive formation, Wu Qi thrust the sword out. A beam of dark light broke the tower from the middle, shattering a large part of the defensive formation in the tower. The purple light between his brows cracked, and the cold electric mirror unleashed several hundred thunderbolts soundlessly. Several dozens of cultivators who soared up into the sky were struck by the thunderbolts, turning into powder and drifting in the air. Wu Qi rushed into Treasure Tower, from the hall on the 1st floor all the way to the secret chamber on the 3rd floor, looting all the energy stones and magical items that he could find. Even the incense burners carved out of spirit jade found in the 4 corners of the hall were not spared, and all of them were thrown into the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. Only when Wu Qi had taken away all the valuables in Treasure Tower did the tower suddenly split apart amidst a jarring creaking noise. 2 parts of the tower smashed viciously onto the roofs of the 2 merchant houses next to each other, triggering their defensive formation. A large sheet of blinding light burst out and shattered the broken walls of Treasure Tower. With a cold snort, Wu Qi took out Dark Crow, spat out a mouthful of blood essence onto the ship, and quickly branded a thread of divine will on it. A large number of hand incantation gestures and talismans for controlling the ship rushed into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Hastily, Wu Qi memorized them with his nascent divinity. Then he spat out a mouthful of energy onto the planetary ship, causing it to expand to a length of 100 feet. Wu Qi leaped onto the ship, and a strong beam of dark golden light shot up into the sky along with a jarring whistling noise. In just a blink of an eye, it had reached a height of nearly 100 miles, and was about to rush out of Dark Radiance Planet's atmosphere. Suddenly, a few figures teleported over from a corner. One of them cried out sternly, "Who are you, thieves? How dare you touch my treasure tower? Prepare to die." A powerful spiritual pressure belonging to a mid-stage nascent divinity cultivator came pressing down from above. The few nascent divinity cultivators struck out at the same time. Sword beams rolled across the sky, slashing viciously towards Dark Crow. There was another peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator standing right in front of Dark Crow, holding a dazzling thunderbolt in both of his hands. Then, he carefully and slowly thrust the thunderbolt downwards. The green thunderbolt illuminated the heaven and earth, and amidst a deafening boom, a 1,000 feet wide green thunderbolt smashed down towards Dark Crow. Chapter 321. Sitting inside Dark Crow, Wu Qi suddenly sensed an enormous and suffocating force of thunder smashing down from above. This thunder force was completely different from the thunder techniques used by ordinary cultivators, as it seemed to have touched upon the true essence of the heavenly thunder. Amidst the green thunderbolts, there was a faint golden gleam, which was the unique color of the immortal energy of Heaven Immortals. Heaven Immortal Gold, Gold Immortal Purple Gold, Primordial Immortal Pure Purple. These were the characteristics of immortal energies possessed by immortals of the 3 tiers. The golden gleam contained in the green thunderbolts proved that this peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator had already begun to temper his body with immortal energies. Even the power of an ordinary thunder technique was at least 100 times stronger than an ordinary thunder technique of 5 elements. In a flurry, Wu Qi performed a series of incantation gestures inside Dark Crow, sending countless bright beams into the ship. While doing so, he also filled the energy core of the ship with a huge pile of supreme-grade energy stones. 3 million, roared Wu Qi, 3 million? You better live up to your 3 million net worth. A deafening boom rang out as a few shocking beams of light smashed viciously onto Dark Crow. The sword beams unleashed by a few nascent divinity cultivators hit the planetary ship and shattered its surface, but they only managed to shatter the first layer of defensive formations. Immediately after the sword beams came a green thunderbolt that came crashing down with a tremendous pressure, clashing viciously with the dark golden beam transformed from Dark Crow. A blinding light flashed across the sky, and the surrounding clouds were pushed away by a tremendous force. Strong sunlight shone through the thousands of miles wide hole in the clouds, shining brightly. The strong light transformed from the planetary ship shattered the green thunderbolts, sending out countless green thunderbolts that were as large as wicker baskets and plunging straight down to the ground, landing heavily in the mountains and fields around Huisian Market. Countless fireballs soared up from the ground, each of which caused the ground within a radius of 1,000 feet to collapse. The tremendous force of the explosion turned the surrounding area into a barren land. At least a few thousand shattered thunderbolts fell to the ground, causing the mountains and fields around Huisian Market to tremble violently, and in just a blink of an eye, the mountains were razed to the ground. The heavenly crow trembled violently, bringing Wu Qi up into the sky at a frighteningly high speed, breaking through the atmosphere of Dark Radiance Planet in an instant. The full-force attack of the peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator had only managed to shatter 39 layers of defensive mechanisms on Dark Crow, and did not cause any damage to the ship itself. Sitting in the cabin, Wu Qi sensed the information the starboat was sending back to him with his sole awareness. He threw his head back and laughed wildly. You're worth it. 3 million high-grade spirit stones, your defensive power is 100 times stronger than a high-grade magic treasure. Planetary ships were used by cultivators who had not reached the heaven immortal realm and could not teleport in the void. There were countless dangers in the starry sky. Meteors, heavenly flames, astral winds, and even sudden explosions of stars could pose a great threat to a cultivator's life. Therefore, the starboat focused on speed and defense, especially the absolute defense it could unleash in an instant, which even heaven immortals could not break through. When Jiangqing Zi fled to Myriad Immortals' planet with Shadow Cloud, Han Shao Immortal was hot on his trail. It took him a painstaking effort to deplete all the energy stones in the planetary ship, and only then was he able to breach the planetary ship's defense and capture Jiangqing Zi alive. It showed how amazing the defensive power of the starboat was. Sitting in the cabin, Wu Qi shoved another pile of supreme-grade energy stones into the power core of the starboat, threw his head back and gave a long laugh. A few mere nascent divinity cultivators can never touch even a single hair of mine. A bunch of rascals. Feng clan, you clan, just you wait, I, Wu Qi, will come back and settle the score with you. Suddenly, a strong light came from the back of the cabin. Hastily, Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture, and a water ripple appeared in the cabin, showing the commotion behind the starboat. 2 planetary ships of the same size and appearance, each about 50 feet long, had broken through the atmosphere of Dark Radiance Planet and were chasing after Wu Qi. Both of them had a black hull, looking like an ordinary ship with a black awning. On the left and right side of the bow were 2 characters, Feng and Yu. A cold gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. Sure enough, those nascent divinity cultivators from Feng clan and Yu clan were not willing to give up. He snorted coldly, locking his divine will on the power core of the starboat. Gradually, Wu Qi slowed down the speed of the starboat, keeping it at the same speed as the 2 planetary ships behind, allowing them to keep a distance of less than 100 miles behind them. The main driving force of a planetary ship was energy stones. As long as there were enough energy stones, even an early-stage nascent soul cultivator could control the planetary ship to travel freely in the void. If there were not enough energy stones, the cultivator would have to rely on himself to provide all the energies for the ship's flight and defense. Apart from that, the cultivator had to have a very strong divine will to control the planetary ship. The divine will of Jin Dan cultivators was definitely not enough to drive a planetary ship with complicated defensive mechanisms. Wu Qi's divine will was very strong, as he had already formed his nascent divinity with the help of the heavenly thunder. The nature of his divine will was no different from a nascent divinity cultivator. On top of that, he had a huge amount of energy stones to waste. Therefore, it was very easy for him to fly. Unhurriedly, he tailed the two planetary ships behind him, flying towards Shui Yuan planet at a speed that was 10% of Dark Crow's. The two planetary ships behind him had already exerted all their strength. But, with the difference in quality between the two planetary ships, Wu Qi could maintain the same speed as them without expending any effort. Staring coldly at the two planetary ships behind him, Wu Qi's heart burned with an evil flame once again. He could tolerate treasure tower robbing and killing customers for their own profit, and Taoist Yi Xian and Yu Song robbing him like a meathead. However, Feng clan and Yu clan were unwilling to let him go. Regardless of the consequences, they had sent out so many nascent divinity cultivators to chase after him. This made the anger in Wu Qi's heart shoot up to the top of his head. Fortunately, it was him, Wu Qi. If it were some other Jin Dan cultivator, he would have been murdered for his wealth. Fortunately, it was him, Wu Qi. If it were some other ordinary cultivator, he would have been held up for a long time. When he thought of the fact that Princess Zhang Li's mother had died at an early age, and if Yan Qijuan were to die on Shui Yuan planet as well, how sad would Princess Zhang Li be? The flame in Wu Qi's heart burned 3 feet high from the top of his head. One could be despicable and shameless, but one could be shameless and despicable to others. When one provoked Wu Qi, he was asking for trouble. Wu Qi snorted coldly. Pretending that he was running out of strength, he slowly lowered the speed of the planetary ship, allowing the two planetary ships behind him to catch up with him. From his storage ring, he fished out an immortal talisman personally crafted by Patriarch Jiang Yun. Slowly, he recited an incantation and carefully took out the phoenix fire pouch from between his brows. The pouch, which had transformed into a palace lantern shaped like a phoenix, flew out from Wu Qi's body while carrying a ball of divine flame of order, which had expanded to 3 feet tall and as thick as an arm. Carefully, Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture on the phoenix fire pouch. Immediately, the ball of divine flame of order swayed slightly. Then a tiny flame, as tiny as a strand of hair and 3 feet long, flew out slowly. Gentle like the ripples of water, it flowed along the runes drawn on the immortal talisman and fused with it. He snorted coldly and retracted the phoenix fire pouch back into his spiritual ocean. Fearing that the offensive power of the immortal talisman was not strong enough, Wu Qi took out several tens of venom sacs from Meng Mountains from Black Dragon's spirit ring. Silently reciting an incantation, a few wisps of dark mist sprayed out from Wu Qi's palm. The art of goo poison, which he learned from Princess Zhang Li, was activated. Accompanied by Wu Qi's incantation, which was jarring and unpleasant to the ear, yet filled with an ancient aura, these fist-sized venom sacs quickly melted and compressed into a pitch-black, translucent ball of venom, hovering above the immortal talisman. Carefully, Wu Qi cast a restrictive spell and hung the ball of venom on the immortal talisman. By the time he was done with all this, an hour had passed. The two planetary ships chasing after him were now less than 10 miles behind Wu Qi. Abruptly, Wu Qi patted the planetary ship, causing it to come to an abrupt stop in midair. Caught unprepared, the two planetary ships dashed forward, leaving behind a bright beam of light, and arrived at a place tens of miles away from Wu Qi. Wu Qi snorted coldly, then ignited a wisp of flame on his fingertip and lit up the immortal talisman. After that, he waved the talisman at the two planetary ships. A loud rumbling noise rang out, as the immortal talisman transformed into a wisp of smoke and formed a 10 feet wide circle in front of Wu Qi. Along with a deafening rumble, an endless stream of white clouds burst out from the circle. Amidst a large sheet of white light, the clouds smashed viciously onto the two planetary ships. A blinding light flickered on the surface of the planetary ships, as several dozens of layers of restrictive spells were destroyed by the tremendous power of the immortal talisman. Only the last restrictive spell that was closest to the ships was still flickering with a blinding light. A wisp of purple and clear flame flashed across, as the divine flame of order, which had fused with the white clouds, broke the last layer of restrictive spells on the planetary ships. Abruptly, the pitch-black hulls of the two planetary ships swayed and began to melt. The hulls of the ships, which were struck by the white clouds, were quickly melted into a black liquid metal by the high temperature. 6 nascent divinity cultivators in the cabin screamed at the same time. They exercised their divine abilities, trying to teleport away. But the white clouds were a powerful restrictive spell in the immortal talisman personally crafted by Patriarch Jiang Yun. Unless their divine will was a few times stronger than Patriarch Jiang Yun, no one would be able to exercise any divine abilities or magical spells. Although the clouds looked light, they were actually as heavy as Mount Tai. The few nascent divinity cultivators could not teleport away, as a series of bone-cracking noises suddenly rang out from inside their bodies. Miserable howls rang out, as the divine flame of order burned the nascent divinity of 4 mid-stage nascent divinity cultivators. The pain made them hold their heads and roll about in midair. Meanwhile, the other 2 peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators transmitted their voices to Wu Qi sternly, "Fellow Taoist, we know our mistake. Please forgive us, fellow Taoist. We, the Feng and Yu clans, will never give you any trouble again." Wu Qi grinned coldly and cursed under his breath, "Fuck you." Then, he transmitted his voice directly into the ears of those nascent divinity cultivators. Amidst the white clouds, a clump of black mist suddenly exploded, releasing a shockingly dense poisonous gas and venom that spread quickly, splashing all 6 cultivators with it. The venom came from the venomous demon beasts living in the depths of Meng Mountains, and its toxicity was strong enough to threaten even nascent divinity cultivators. With the combination of the spirit cloud, the divine flame, and the venom, before the 6 nascent divinity cultivators could even see Wu Qi's face, they were already beaten by Wu Qi, who showed no mercy at all. 6 nascent divinity cultivators howled miserably as they tumbled and rolled in midair. Then, Wu Qi casually pointed his finger out, causing 14 wolf heads to shoot out together with 6 pitch-black sword beams, piercing through the vital spots between the brows of 6 cultivators. The sword of greedy wolf crazily devoured the spirit, energy, and soul of 6 cultivators. However, as it had already had a full meal today, it could not digest any more spirit energies in a short period of time. Through the spiritual connection between Wu Qi and the sword of greedy wolf, a vast amount of pure prime energy essence was injected into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi's 10 Jin Dan were spinning at top speed, quickly devouring the vast amount of energy essence. A vast amount of innate energies rushed out from the Jin Dan, causing Wu Qi's Jin Dan to expand slightly. An enormous amount of blood and flesh energy essence flowed through his entire body. Quietly, Wu Qi exercised the dragon transformation script. Vaguely, dragon scales could be seen flashing under his skin. After a full 6 hours, Wu Qi had barely digested a part of the energy essence, and even stored most of it in his body. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi drove planet Blackcrow, leaving behind a strong beam of light as he flew at the highest speed towards Shui Yuan planet, which was visible to the naked eye. After traveling for 24 hours, planet Blackcrow finally broke through Shui Yuan planet's atmosphere and entered the territory of the planet. Keeping the planet, Wu Qi stepped on a cloud and hovered high up in the sky. Just as he was about to determine the direction of Snowflake City according to the information he received in the Jade Archive, he saw a dozen beams of light approaching at top speed amidst a cloud about 100 miles to the west. A faintly discernible immortal pressure came brushing against his face, as a cold voice cried out sternly, "Who are you?" Why are you trespassing on Shuiyuan planet? Immortals? Without saying a word, Wu Qi plunged down from the sky at top speed like a rock. Chapter 322. A Heaven Immortal, a Heaven Immortal. Wu Qi's body tore through the air and plunged down to the ground like a meteor. Those cultivators flying toward him from afar were certainly not good people. He had just entered Shuiyuan planet's atmosphere and was still several hundred miles above the ground. How could there be a Heaven Immortal patrolling in the clouds? As a Heaven Immortal, his status in Liyuan Galaxy was lofty and unreachable. So, how could there be a Heaven Immortal patrolling in the clouds? Clearly, they were waiting in the atmosphere, and Wu Qi had no idea what they were up to. Therefore, when Wu Qi sensed the immortal pressure, he immediately stepped on his sword beam and sped down to the ground, not bothering to talk to those cultivators who were flying toward him. Suddenly, the immortal pressure, which was initially weak, came pressing down on him like Mount Tai. Wu Qi's chest tightened, and his vision darkened. He was nearly knocked unconscious by the enormous immortal pressure. Fortunately, his soul had fused with the Jin Dan. Although the nascent divinity formed by borrowing the power of heavenly thunder in his spiritual ocean was weak, its essence was extremely solid. On top of that, it also contained the pure yang energy of heavenly thunder, which gave it a very strong defense against the invasion of external evils. The enormous immortal pressure pressed down on Wu Qi's nascent divinity like several thousand heavy hammers hammering on an alloy ingot. Sparks flew in all directions, yet it failed to crush it. Instead, it knocked out some impurities in the alloy, making it even more compact, tougher, and indestructible. Wu Qi coughed out a mouthful of blood. To his horror, he found that his nascent divinity, which was the size of a human head, had shrunk to the size of a thumb after tiny specks of dim golden light shot out from its body. The thumb-sized nascent divinity that looked exactly the same as Wu Qi was now hovering above the phoenix fire pouch, clenching its jaws tightly and drawing out a thin curtain of purple and green flame with the power of divine flame of order, using it to resist the invasion of the immortal pressure. Meanwhile, the 10 Jin Dan were spinning at an incredible speed, crazily absorbing innate energies to defend against the immortal pressure. Wu Qi's body was emitting cracking noises as well, as the immortal pressure smashed into his body after he absorbed the enormous essence, energy, and divinity of the nascent divinity cultivator. His body automatically began to circulate the dragon transformation script, and under the immense threat of the immortal pressure, he began to absorb the essences in the energy essences at an incredible speed, casting away some of the impurities in his body. A faint dragon roar could be heard coming from his chest, and the muscles on his body bulged up. An enormous power was brewing inside his body. The powerful immortal energy tempered Wu Qi's primordial spirit, tempered Wu Qi's Jin Dan, and tempered his fleshly body. Wu Qi suffered unspeakably under the pressure of the immortal pressure, but he also obtained great benefits. Gurgling noises could be heard coming from his throat. There were a few times when he could not restrain himself from activating the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield to protect himself, but every time, he would force himself to give up the impulse. It was true that the immortal pressure was frightening, but it was truly helping him to temper his fleshly body, helping his cultivation base to advance to the next level. Under the pressure of the immortal pressure, 80% of the energy essences of 6 nascent divinity cultivators, the enormous energy essences that nearly 30,000 years of laborious cultivation, quickly fused with Wu Qi's body, powering his fleshly body, Jin Dan, and nascent divinity, and obtaining great benefits. The immortal pressure unleashed by the Heaven Immortal off in the distance only lasted for 3 to 5 breaths of time to suppress Wu Qi, but Wu Qi, whose eyes were bloodshot, had already absorbed all the energy essences stored in his body just now. His skin was now covered with a thick layer of black filth, which was the impurities expelled from his body by the dragon transformation script. The dragon cry that had been brewing in his chest finally burst out from his mouth. A sonorous dragon cry towered into the sky, shattering the clouds within 100 miles around him, and actually stirring up the immortal pressure unleashed by the Heaven Immortal from afar. Wu Qi gave a wild laugh, then sped up abruptly and plunged towards the ground with all his might. "How dare you, little junior!" The heaven immortal roared furiously. Suddenly, the immortal pressure that was suppressing Wu Qi became 100 times stronger, as if it had a corporeal quality. Amidst sheets of strong green light, it pressed towards Wu Qi. If he had unleashed such a powerful immortal pressure to suppress Wu Qi from the very beginning, perhaps Wu Qi's nascent divinity and soul would have been crushed by him. However, after absorbing all the energy essences of 6 nascent divinity cultivators, Wu Qi's body had gone through a tremendous transformation. Therefore, the immortal pressure could only make his vision turn dark, and he coughed out another mouthful of blood. With a twist of his left wrist, the earth element dragon scale shield burst out with a large sheet of yellowish auspicious light, enveloping Wu Qi. The enormous immortal pressure smashed onto the energy barrier formed from innate earth element energy essence, causing ripples to spread out from it. Yet, it could not break through the freakish defense of the earth element dragon scale shield. Wu Qi sneered. Seeing that he was less than 10 miles away from the ground, he spun his head and shouted at the cultivators who were chasing after him, "I'll remember all of you. Just you wait. If I can survive today, I'll definitely report to my sect and fight you to the death." Although it was just a threat, the heaven immortal who was chasing after Wu Qi froze. Abruptly, he retracted his immortal pressure and cried out, "Fellow Taoist, which immortal do you belong to? Tell me your name. This is just a misunderstanding. I'm Vagabond Qing Yi from the Wanyang Star. Have you heard of my name, fellow Taoist?" Behind Wu Qi was still the strange sign of water waves, which he used to hide his identity in the dark radiant star. No matter how one looked at him, he looked like an ordinary Jin Dan human immortal. But how could a mere human immortal from the Jin Dan, who looked like an ant, withstand the immortal pressure unleashed by Vagabond Qing Yi with all his might? It was something that not even ordinary nascent divinity cultivators could do. Apparently, Wu Qi was either protected by some extraordinary treasure, an immortal talisman, or an extraordinary cultivation technique. Either way, it proved that Wu Qi had a profound background. How could Vagabond Qing Yi be willing to make enemies out of nothing? Rolling his eyes, Wu Qi silently exercised the mountain ghost Yin deity technique taught to him by Princess Zhanglu. Suddenly, a faint dark cloud of ghost energy soared out from his body. Vagabond Qing Yi from the Wanyang Star? Naturally, my ancestral master will settle the score with you for what happened today. I'm Taoist Ghost from the Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect. Vagabond Qing Yi's expression turned stiff. A disciple of the Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect? A disciple of the Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect, one of the 2 strongest evil immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy? With Jin Dan's cultivation base, he was able to withstand his immortal pressure. Apparently, only the trusted disciple of White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady could have such confidence. The Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect was famous for seeking revenge for the smallest grievance. When someone provoked them, the revenge would usually last for thousands of years. It was a huge hornet's nest that would give anyone a headache and could not be poked. Over the past few years, the 2 ancestral masters of the Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect, White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady, had suddenly disappeared without a trace. According to Vagabond Qing Yi's understanding of them, they must be hiding somewhere, practicing some evil cultivation technique or some powerful ghost magic. Therefore, Vagabond Qing Yi dared not to do anything to Wu Qi. After all, Vagabond Qing Yi was the only heaven immortal guarding the Carefree Palace in the Wanyang Star. Twitching his lips, Vagabond Qing Yi thought of all the troubles that would come after provoking the Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect. Fellow Taoist, please wait. This must be a misunderstanding. Fellow Taoist, fellow Taoist. With just a few words, Wu Qi had plunged headfirst into the thick layer of Xianbing Shuiyuan planet. In just a blink of an eye, he had plunged several thousand feet deep into the ground. Wu Qi roared through voice transmission, "Misunderstanding my ass. We, the Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect, have never suffered such a loss before. Just you wait, The two ancestral masters will come to your Luanyang planet and explain everything to you. Vagabond Qin Yi's hand trembled, and he stamped his foot on the cloud. Looking at the group of cultivators behind him, he smiled bitterly and said, "What do you mean by this?" Chang Wu's companion coveted the generous reward of energy stones, and failed to kill someone on the street of Snowflake City. In the end, the city was destroyed by someone, forcing me to fight for your master's wife. In the end, I provoked a group of demons and devils from the Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect. Why bother? After drilling into the ground, Wu Qi quickly switched to the innate escape art of water element, transforming into a wisp of white water vapor and darting about wildly in the Xianbing. Slowly, he poked half of his head out from under an ice rock about 1 mile away. His aura had faintly merged with the surrounding ice layer, and even the divine will of a heaven immortal could not detect his presence. Narrowing his eyes and looking at Vagabond Qin Yi, Wu Qi heard every single word of Vagabond Qin Yi's grumbling. Immortal Chang Wu's companion coveted the energy stones, and that's why she killed someone on the street of Snowflake City? The person she killed must be Yan Qijuan and his company. Wu Qi recalled the information he had read in the books in White Cloud Immortal Sect during the last 3 years. The companion of Immortal Chang Wu from Grand Marshal Palace was born in Lin Clan of Snowflake City on Shuiyuan planet. She was born with the 9 yin meridians, an excellent physique for cultivation, and a great benefit to Immortal Chang Wu's cultivation. From this, it could be seen that this daughter of Lin Clan coveted the generous reward of energy stones that was promised by someone, and had pretended to be a killer and killed someone on the street. Grand Marshal Palace? Immortal Chang Wu? As long as Yan Qijuan is safe and sound, Great Yan Dynasty will take care of the revenge on you. If anything happens to Yan Qijuan, as he is my father-in-law, I'll definitely wipe out your entire clan. A cold gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes, and he swore in his mind, Lin Clan of Snowflake City? There's no need for you and your entire clan to live any longer. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi was about to exercise the innate escape art of water and rush towards Snowflake City. But suddenly, a large group of bright beams approached from afar. A middle-aged man clad in a sky-blue armor, looking valiant, and a Taoist clad in a fiery red Taoist robe, with a pair of round eyes and a curly beard, were flying towards them from afar, bringing with them a group of several dozens of cultivators of different cultivation bases. From far away, the middle-aged man and the fiery robed Taoist cried out, "Fellow Immortal Qin Yi, did you notice something?" Vagabond Qin Yi smiled wryly, nodded at both of them and said, "Immortal Chang Wu, Immortal Xian Yang, just now, a disciple of Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect drove a planetary ship into Shuiyuan planet." Using only a few words, Vagabond Qin explained what happened just now, especially mentioning how, although he did not attack, he unleashed his immortal pressure with all his might, and yet failed to kill that Taoist ghost. Immortal Chang Wu and Immortal Xian Yang, clad in a fiery red Taoist robe, exchanged a glance, and cried out in surprise at the same time. The three of them looked at each other for a while, then a cold gleam flashed in Immortal Chang Wu's eyes as he cried out fiercely, "So what if he is from Iron Ghost's soul-seizing sect? With the three of us working together, we are not afraid of White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady. Clearly, this incident is just a misunderstanding. If they are willing to settle this peacefully, then so be it. But, if they are unwilling, we'll have to have a good fight with them, and kill the arrogance of these two fiends." Immortal Xian Yang and Vagabond Qin Yi cheered at the same time, then came to an agreement of advancing and retreating together. While the three of them were discussing, Immortal Chang Wu's body suddenly turned stiff. Casually, he produced a jade talisman, tilted his head and listened attentively for a while, then threw his head back and gave a loud laugh. "Excellent. Qiu Luo has found those 3 rascals. Let's go there now and kill them, then we'll share all the benefits equally." The 3 heaven immortals laughed joyfully, then brought their disciples behind them, transformed into a large group of bright beams and flew towards the north. Yan Qijuan was discovered? Wu Qi's heart gave a jerk, and he quickly exercised an escape art and followed after them. Chapter 323. Lin Qiulua, with her long hair disheveled and her face twisted ferociously like some evil ghost, was flying high up in the sky. A shuttle-shaped thunderbolt was seen flashing and flashing in her right hand. Every now and then, a 10-feet-thick thunderbolt would come whistling down from the sky, exploding one after another on the Xianbing layer, which had remained untouched since the ancient times. The deafening explosions stirred up the tranquil snowfield. Countless beasts were seen running wildly, leaving this land of death at full speed. On the flat snowfield, because of the tremendous impact, large chunks of Xianbing cracked, revealing long, deep, and pitch-black cracks underneath. Then, some more Xianbing poked out from the snowfield. Exposed under the sunlight, their sharp edges and corners that looked like blades and swords were reflecting a cold gleam. Another thunderbolt came whistling down. This time, it smashed onto a broken Xianbing layer. A deafening boom that shook the heaven and earth echoed out. A large piece of Xianbing cracked, and the Xianbing layer within 100 miles suddenly collapsed. Countless streams of cold air that were as sharp as blades soared up into the sky, erecting a vast white curtain between the heaven and the earth. The shattering of the ice layer triggered a chain reaction. The ice layer that was collapsing gradually spread far into the distance. Accompanied by a deafening boom, a huge pit that measured over 300 miles in diameter and was about 100 miles deep was created on the ice layer underneath Lin Qiulua. Most of the area under the 100 miles thick ice layer on Shuiyuan planet was a deep ocean. After the ice layer collapsed, the surface of the ocean, which had never been exposed to sunlight since ancient times, was exposed. White ice chunks of various sizes were drifting weakly on the pitch-black surface of the ocean. Vaguely, some huge dark shadows could be seen moving at top speed under the surface of the ocean, emanating an enormous demon aura that towered into the sky. Lin Qiulua looked down at the ocean that suddenly appeared under her in astonishment. Even though she was a native of Shuiyuan planet, very few people knew what was underneath this 100 miles thick ice layer. Upon seeing such a vast ocean, Lin Qiulua's curiosity was immediately aroused. Especially the faintly discernible demonic energies, some of them actually made Lin Qiulua feel an instinctive fear, which made all the pores on her body stand on end. Lin Qiulua gasped and put away the shuttle-shaped offensive immortal item. She did not know how vast the sea below was. If she continued to bombard it, it would trigger an uncontrollable chain reaction and cause the entire ice rock to collapse. The consequences were not something she could bear. Lin Qiulua glanced coldly at the vast expanse of white ice around her, clenched her jaws tightly and cursed, "You three rascals! Now that you are in my hands, I'll definitely make you beg for death." And that scoundrel, with just a measly reward of spirit stones, he made me provoke such a troublesome enemy and caused such a huge disaster. If I don't make you bleed 100-fold, how can I answer to the 3 great clans of Drift's now city? While Lin Qiulua was venting her anger, a huge dark shadow suddenly rushed up to the surface of the ocean. Accompanied by a deafening roar, an incomparably huge and terrifying sea beast rushed out of its slumber. The shape of the beast was similar to that of a swanni, but its body was over 100 miles long, with several hundred extremely long and thick tentacles growing near its mouth. At the tip of each tentacle was a huge pearl, measuring several tens of feet in diameter, emitting a bizarre demonic gleam that could shake one's mind. Surprisingly, on the enormous body of the sea beast was a pair of huge, translucent wings that looked like those of a flying fish. Flapping the wings at an incredible speed, the beast soared up to a height of 100 miles, and in just a blink of an eye, it had arrived at a height of less than 3 miles below Lin Qiulua. The sea beast opened its mouth, and a pitch-black hole, measuring tens of miles in circumference, appeared out of nowhere. Inside the huge mouth were countless triangular sharp teeth of different sizes. A frightening suction force suddenly came from the mouth, causing Lin Qiulua and the 12 nascent divinity cultivators to feel their bodies sink down uncontrollably. Lin Qiulua gave a shrill cry. Without hesitation, she produced the shuttle-shaped immortal item once again, injecting all her energies into it in a blink of an eye. With that, She forced out a dozen green thunderbolts, each about 1 mile in diameter, and smashed them down towards the enormous and frightening ocean beast. A loud boom rang out, as one huge flaming cloud after another enveloped half of the sea beast's body. The green thunderbolts exploded on its smooth and scaleless body, leaving behind several tens of large holes that went deep into its internal organs. A huge amount of blood sprayed out from the holes. The sea beast let out a shrill and unpleasant howl, then plunged back into the ocean in a sorry state. Before turning around and fleeing, the several hundred tentacles near the huge mouth aimed straight at Lin Qiulua and the 12 nascent divinity cultivators standing behind her. At the same time, a blinding light burst out from the pearls on the tip of each tentacle. Amidst bizarre hissing noises, several hundred strong beams, each several tens of feet in diameter, shot out from the tip of the tentacles, smashing viciously onto the bodies of Lin Qiulua and the rest of the people. Lin Qiulua's immortal armor suddenly emitted a sheet of white light, firmly blocking the full force attack of the sea beast before it retreated. On the other side, the 12 nascent divinity cultivators behind her let out a miserable howl. The armors worn by the 5 weakest nascent divinity cultivators were destroyed by the sea beast, and their bodies melted like candles under a scorching flame under the bombardment of the strange demon beam. In just a blink of an eye, they were melted into a liquid that came together with an alluring aroma of meat, falling back to the surface of the ocean. The sea beast plunged back into the ocean, opened its mouth joyfully, and swallowed the liquid of the 5 nascent divinity cultivators into its stomach. Then, 5 nascent divinities shot up into the sky, howling furiously as they sped up into the sky. Lin Qiulua stared at the fleeing nascent divinities of her 5 disciples, and felt a bitter taste in her mouth. After losing their fleshly bodies, they could either choose to possess another body, or cultivate with pure nascent divinity. However, the cultivation technique passed down in Grand Marshal Palace paid more attention to the tempering of the fleshly body, as 70% of the cultivation base was focused on the fleshly body. After losing their fleshly bodies, it was nearly impossible to cultivate their nascent divinity to peak stage nascent divinity realm, transcend the heavenly tribulation, and become a heaven immortal. In order to possess another body, the fleshly body must be able to withstand the enormous power of the nascent divinity. Only by possessing the fleshly body of at least a peak stage nascent soul cultivator would there be any hope. However, which peak stage nascent soul cultivator would be willing to give up their fleshly body? On top of that, the cultivation technique of Grand Marshal Palace was unique, as it required a fleshly body and spirit root that was different from ordinary cultivators. Therefore, it was even harder to find a suitable fleshly body. Or perhaps, reincarnation? She would have to give up the several thousands of years of hard work just like that? Lin Qiulua nearly had a mental breakdown due to the sudden incident. In Grand Marshal Palace, there were only slightly over 30 nascent divinity cultivators serving under Immortal Chang Wu. Now, she had lost 20% of them. Although she was Immortal Chang Wu's most beloved wife, the responsibility was still too much for her to bear. These disciples had been following Immortal Chang Wu for several thousands of years, and the relationship between them was very deep. It had been less than 1,000 years since Lin Qiulua became Immortal Chang Wu's wife. Looking at the 5 disciples' nascent divinities flying out of their bodies in bewilderment, Lin Qiulua suddenly scolded hysterically, "You 5 idiots! Useless fools! How could you allow an ocean beast to destroy your fleshly bodies? You are a disgrace to Grand Marshal Palace." Lin Qiulua's sudden outburst stunned all the disciples standing around her. Anger rose up in the hearts of the 5 disciples who had their fleshly bodies destroyed, while the expressions of the other 7 nascent divinity cultivators flickered. Led by 3 peak stage nascent divinity cultivators, they quickly retreated from Lin Qiulua, forming a formation to protect the nascent divinities of their 5 fellow disciples, and gave up on protecting Lin Qiulua. The leader, the nascent divinity cultivator with a large round shield, stared coldly at Lin Qiulua and said, "Master's wife, this demon beast has an incredible cultivation base, and it was because of your personal affair that my 5 junior brothers had their fleshly bodies damaged. Master's wife's words really make one's heart go cold. Cupping his fist, the nascent divinity cultivator shook his head and said, Master's wife, take your time to hunt down those 3 men. In any case, it is impossible for them to escape from Shui Yuan planet. I'm going to escort my 5 junior brothers to stabilize their nascent divinities. My 5 junior brothers have not reached the realm where their nascent divinities can leave their bodies at will. They will have to rely on various spirit herbs to stabilize their nascent divinities, and only then will they have a slight hope of continuing their cultivation in the future. Master's wife, are you going to leave with us? Lin Chilua was struck dumb. How could the disciples of Grand Martial Palace treat her like this? Staring fixedly at the group of nascent divinity cultivators, she roared fiercely, You bunch of rascals! Are you trying to rebel? I'm your master's wife. How dare you disrespect me? The nascent divinity cultivator with the round shield gave Lin Qiulua a look of disgust. Then he glanced at the nascent divinities of his 5 junior brothers and said coldly, There are more than 10 masters' wives in Grand Martial Palace. Lin Qiulua, do you really think you are the mistress of Grand Martial Palace? If not because you possess the 9 meridians, how could Master take a liking to a vain, shallow, arrogant fool like you? After pointing their fingers at Lin Qiulua and scolding her, the 12 nascent divinity cultivators from Grand Martial Palace did not pay any more attention to Lin Qiulua. They spun, stepped into bright beams and flew towards Snowmess City. At the same time, the cultivator with the round shield used a mystic technique of Grand Martial Palace to inform his master about the situation here. Lin Qiulua was struck dumb as she stared at the direction where those disciples were flying away. Are you really going to leave me here alone? Are you really trying to rebel? Lin Qiulua stared blankly at those fast disappearing beams, then suddenly howled hysterically, I won't let you go. You will definitely be severely punished. Your disciples, your clan members, your descendants, I won't let any of them go. For you, I'm the mistress of Grand Martial Palace. When the oceanic creature saw all the nascent divinity cultivators flying away, leaving Lin Qiulua alone in the sky, its greed was immediately aroused. It threw its head back and gave a long roar. Twisting its huge body, it sprung up into the sky and opened its mouth to swallow Lin Qiulua. Lin Qiulua shrieked. As if she had gone mad, she casually drew a spirit incantation on the shuttle-shaped immortal item. Without worrying about damaging its source, she used the method of overdrawing its source energy, causing the immortal item to burst out with a blinding purple-gold light. All of a sudden, a shuttle-shaped purple-gold thunderbolt, measuring 1,000 feet in circumference, emerged in her palm. The throbbing thunderbolt did not produce any sound. Instead, like a sticky, melted crystal, it was wheeling soundlessly around her body. With her face twisted and her eyes staring blankly, Lin Qiulua raised the thunderbolt and threw it forcefully towards the oceanic creature. Go to hell! Go to hell! Damned woman! Snowmess City is destroyed. If you don't give me 100 million upper-grade energy stones, I'll wipe out your entire clan. The thunderbolt smashed into the oceanic creature's mouth, and a frightening power exploded out. The oceanic creature let out a despairing roar. Without hesitation, it spun around and tried to dive back into the ocean. But it was too late for it. Soundlessly, the purple-gold thunderbolt burst out from its body, burning its huge body into a wisp of green smoke that drifted away in the air. Then, the purple-gold thunderbolt spread out quietly, blanketing the layer of ice 1,000 miles in circumference. The Xianbing disappeared soundlessly, and only then did the purple-gold thunderbolt slowly disperse. The shuttle-shaped immortal item flew back into Lin Qiulua's hand. However, the immortal item, which was once filled with natural energies and emanating a faint immortal pressure, had become mottled, looking like a rusty bronze item. It no longer had the mighty aura it once had. Lin Qiulua had overdrawn its source energy, nearly causing the item's spirit in this rare immortal item to vanish, and nearly turning it into a scrap metal. The Xianbing vanished, and a pale purple smoke cloud suddenly appeared off in the distance. In just a blink of an eye, the smoke cloud shattered and disintegrated, revealing 3 figures in a wretched state. Staring at the 3 figures, Lin Chilua howled at the top of her lungs, "It's you 3 rascals!" Then she waved her hand casually, unleashing 5 razor-sharp energy beams that pierced several hundred miles through the sky, thrusting towards the 3 figures. Chapter 324. Faced with the 5 incoming airstreams, Yan Qijuan, whose energy was almost depleted, let out a long cry, sparing no effort to burn his nascent soul which he had just formed. An enormous and pure energy emerged out of thin air, as a large sheet of gray and white energy rushed out from Yan Qijuan's body. Cursing with a harsh voice, he pulled out the last life-saving magical treasure he had, the pendant of life and death. A sheet of gray and white strong light soared into the sky, transforming into a shield-shaped light screen before Yan Qijuan. A loud boom rang out, as the 5 airstreams smashed viciously onto the light screen transformed from the pendant of life and death. The grayish-white light shook violently, and after 2 seconds of friction, the 5 airstreams, which were at least 10 times weaker, smashed onto Yan Qijuan's body. They pierced through his chest and came out from his back, opening up 5 transparent wounds the size of a human palm on his body. Coughing out mouthfuls of blood, Yan Qijuan's eyes went wide with blood as he roared, "Bitch! If I don't die, I'll wipe out your entire clan in the future." Grabbing the unconscious Xiong Wanling and He Qianxiu with one hand, Yan Qijuan burned his nascent soul crazily, transforming his body into a blinding beam of light and shooting forward. In that very moment, Yan Qijuan had actually exerted a frightening speed that was close to teleportation. The distance of several hundred miles was covered in just a blink of an eye, and he plunged headfirst into the thick layer of ice several hundred miles away. Immediately after that, several dozens of frightening airstreams came smashing down, blotting out the sky and shattering the Xianbing within a circumference of 1 mile. The frightening airstreams kept chasing after him. Yan Qijuan was smashed by the airwaves, causing blood to burst out from his 7 apertures at the same time. Nearly falling into a coma, Yan Qijuan clenched his jaws tightly. With an aura of fearlessness that only a lone wolf at the end of his rope, he desperately exercised all the spells he could, breaking through the layer of ice and fleeing for his life. Sometimes he would turn left, sometimes he would turn right. Sometimes he would use the 5 elements escape art to break through the Xianbing. Sometimes he would use his body to break through the layer of ice and escape. Sometimes he would use the natural tunnel in the layer of ice to escape. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, with his fleshly body on the verge of collapse, Yan Qijuan dragged Xiong Wanling and He Qianxiu several hundred miles away, as if by a miracle, and fell heavily into a cave eroded by seawater under the Xianbing. His nascent soul, which he had just condensed yesterday, was already on the verge of death. The true essence in his body was once again exhausted, 9 out of 10 meridians in his body were broken, and his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were broken. Even Yan Qijuan himself could feel that there were 2 huge wounds on his heart. His heart was nearly cut into 3 pieces. Now, a huge amount of blood was gushing out from the wounds, filling up his chest quickly. Touching the storage ring on his finger, Yan Qijuan smiled bitterly. He had run out of the last bit of healing spirit pills. He, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianxiu were lying side by side on the ground, quietly waiting for the arrival of death. Yesterday, when they were ambushed by Lin Qiulua and her men in Snowflake City, Yan Qijuan and his companions were lucky enough to escape from the city by relying on the self-explosion of his men of sacrifice. However, not long after they fled, He Qianxiu, who suffered a severe injury to his head, fell to the ground, and was caught up by Lin Qiulua and her men. Lin Qiulua, who was anxious to kill Yan Qijuan and his companions, brazenly attacked with an immortal item. An immortal thunderbolt struck down, forcing Yan Qijuan to unleash the purple smoke tent to defend himself. But how could the tent withstand the attack of an immortal item? Right when the purple smoke touched the immortal thunderbolt, it was nearly shattered into pieces. Fortunately, Xiong Wanling had transformed back into his true form of a demon bear, using his huge body to defend against the thunderbolt and protect Yan Qijuan and He Qianxiu. With Xiong Wanling's cultivation base of nearly 10,000 years, and the formidable defensive strength of his fleshly body after transforming back into his true form, the immortal thunderbolt nearly shattered his back. The muscles on his back were ripped into nothingness, one of his vertebrae was broken into 7 to 8 parts, and all his internal organs were exposed to the air. Even his nascent divinity was severely wounded by the immortal thunderbolt, nearly perishing his soul. Fortunately, he had risked his life to protect them, and had barely saved Yan Qijuan and He Qianqiu. However, both of He Qianqiu's legs were shattered by the immortal thunderbolt, and Yan Qijuan was shaken by it, nearly dying. Fortunately, Lin Qiulua had unleashed another immortal thunderbolt and blasted a deep pit about 100 miles deep on the snowfield. Yan Qijuan, who was barely able to maintain his consciousness, grabbed Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu, who were severely wounded and on the verge of death, and plunged into the pit. Then he fled desperately through a cracked underground tunnel. After a few turns and turns, he was lucky enough to escape from Lin Qiulua's pursuit. What was even more miraculous was that, although Yan Qijuan was severely wounded by the remaining force of the immortal thunderbolt, and his body was nearly shattered to pieces, in just 15 minutes, he had broken through the bottleneck of peak stage Jin Dan realm, which had troubled him for over 1,000 years, and formed his nascent soul. On top of that, the speed of forming his nascent soul was extremely fast, and there was no thunder tribulation. With that, he smoothly attained the cultivation base of early-stage nascent soul realm. Although his cultivation base had skyrocketed, he was still severely wounded. Although Yan Qijuan had consumed all the spirit pills he brought with him, he could barely keep Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu alive. On top of that, this tiny thread of life force was about to vanish at any time. Yan Qijuan was forced into a desperate situation. He had no choice but to flee in the direction of Flying Snow City under the cover of the snowfield, trying to return to Myriad Immortals' planet through the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation there. As a result, he was once again discovered by Lin Qiulua, who chased after him all the way, forcing him to hide in the snowfield. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Lin Qiulua would be so insane that she actually used the source power of her immortal item, unleashing a deadly strike that was almost equivalent to detonating the immortal item. The snowfield covering 1,000 miles in circumference was destroyed, and he was forced out from his hiding place. The life-saving purple smoke tent was completely destroyed by the heavenly thunderbolt, and he, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianqiu were badly shaken by the remaining force of the thunderbolt, and were not far from death. If not for him burning his nascent soul just now, perhaps he would not have been able to escape to this place. There was a strange phosphorescence flickering in the cave, and a faint blue glow illuminated the surroundings. Some transparent jellyfishes were swimming freely in the Xianbing, which was a few times stronger than steel. Their hazy figures looked like ghosts, and it was these jellyfishes who emitted the blue glow. Yan Qijuan stared at these jellyfishes with surprise, wondering how they could swim freely in the ice. His injuries were worsening, and the feeling of death was invading his body and soul inch by inch. Lying next to him, Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu's breathing was getting weaker and weaker, and their bodies were getting colder. In despair, Yan Qijuan looked at those agile jellyfishes and breathed out a faint sigh. Not a loss in this life. Yan Qijuan said in a self-mocking tone, as the crown prince of Great Yan Dynasty, I've been living a luxurious life since I was born. I've never suffered any setbacks or sufferings. While the other members of the imperial clan were going through harsh trials for the sake of power and cultivation base, as the crown prince of Great Yan Dynasty, I've been living a carefree life for the past 2,000 years. I've only been enjoying my life. Not a loss in this life. He laughed bitterly, and a large amount of black blood oozed out from the corner of his mouth. Yan Qijuan murmured under his breath, but I really can't accept this. What have I done in this life of over 2,000 years? Besides that time when I went to Mo City to fight against the Heaven Immortals, this is the first time I've left G City. For over 2,000 years, this is the first time I've really left G City. 2,000 years of imprisonment, I really can't accept this. Black blood oozed out from his 7 apertures. With great difficulty, Yan Qijuan turned his head and gave Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu a glance, who were on the verge of death. I've even dragged both Imperial advisors into this, especially Imperial advisor Xiong. If nothing unexpected happens, he will soon break through the late stage of nascent divinity realm and become a heaven immortal. Yan Qijuan raised his head and looked at the jellyfish, who were swimming freely in the Xianbing. Countless faces flashed before his eyes. Finally, a pretty face suddenly froze in front of him. Yan Qijuan was struck dumb, then he suddenly laughed and said, Why is it you? Although you are Zi Xian's birth mother, and Zi Xian is my most beloved daughter, but you. I've even forgotten how you look like. How can I still see your face? The face gradually turned blurry, and suddenly, Wu Qi's face popped out. Yan Qijuan coughed violently, clenched his teeth and said angrily, Please let me die in peace. Why do I have to think of him before I die? Not only did this damn kid deceive Zi Xian with flowery words, he even had the audacity to lure a heaven immortal into myriad immortals' planet. This bastard he. Suddenly, a tremendous tremor was heard coming from afar, followed by a jarring rumble that kept echoing in the cave. It shook Yan Qijuan so much that blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and his eardrums nearly burst. Yan Qijuan cried out in terror, That damned bitch has caught up with us? Don't let me live. Otherwise, I'll have your entire clan executed. I'm going to retaliate with the cruelest means. A strange force suddenly emerged out of nowhere. Laughing evilly, Yan Qijuan straightened his back and rose to his feet. Although his spine was broken into 3 parts, he managed to straighten his back and stand up. He grabbed Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu up with one hand, then laughed aloud and said, My dear Imperial advisors, if we are going to die, let's find a quiet place to die. Wouldn't it be too embarrassing if we are humiliated by a girl before we die? While laughing wildly, Yan Qijuan dragged Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu's bodies with heavy steps, staggering along the rugged and eroded path in the cave. The deafening rumble behind them was getting closer and closer, and vaguely, there were air blasts coming from behind. All of a sudden, a bright light shone above them, as the thick layer of ice was shattered by a tremendous force. Lin Qiolua, clad in a white immortal armor, with a long white whip wheeling around her like a flying dragon, was seen hovering above Yan Qijuan's head. Yan Qijuan. Good, very good. You've destroyed Snowflake City and caused 5 disciples of Grand Marshal Palace to lose their fleshly bodies. Good, very good, very good. How should I thank you? Hundreds of thousands of people in Snowflake City have been destroyed. 5 disciples of Grand Marshal Palace of Nascent Divinity Realm have lost their fleshly bodies. Even if they are hacked into pieces, the hatred in my heart will never be erased. Lin Qiolua's face twisted with anger, and her body was trembling violently. With a swing of the whip, a white beam shot out and pierced through Yan Qijuan's body from his back. After that, she swung it forcefully and tore open a hideous wound on his body. From his heart to his right shoulder, half of Yan Qijuan's body was ripped apart, and a large amount of dark blood kept rushing out from the wound. With great difficulty, Yan Qijuan raised his head, staring at Lin Qiolua and laughed strangely. Well then, woman, why don't you obediently become my plaything, and let me help you vent your anger? At the moment of death, Yan Qijuan was too lazy to care about the Tao of etiquette. Instead, he simply learned from those street thugs, and began to talk in a flowery manner. Lin Qiolua's body turned stiff, and she shrieked furiously while baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. Casually, she pointed her finger at the whip. A dragon roar echoed out, as the whip brought out a white beam that was as thick as a water bucket and smashed down viciously towards the top of Yan Qijuan's head. Yan Qijuan closed his eyes and waited for his death. Sensing a strong gust of wind pressing down from above, he sighed and murmured, I should have known. The whip came whistling down. Chapter 325. Wu Qi chased after immortal Chang Wu and his companions for some distance. Suddenly, 12 beams of light came flying over from the front. He saw immortal Chang Wu hurriedly approach them, shouting at the top of his voice. Among the 12 men flying over, 5 of them were nascent divinities who had just lost their fleshly bodies. Obviously, they were immortal Chang Wu's 12 apprentices. Immortal Chang Wu had learned the whole story from his apprentices just now. He rushed forward, first giving his apprentices a harsh scolding, then cursing Lin Qiulua. Finally, he turned to immortal Xian Yang for help, begging him to give him a few spirit pills that could stabilize their nascent divinity so that he could save his 5 apprentices. Immortal Xian Yang and vagabond Qin Yi had also come over to watch the show. The fact that 5 nascent divinity disciples of Grand Martial Palace had their fleshly bodies destroyed was not something that could be easily seen. Immortal Xian Yang was an expert in pill concoction, and his attainment was only slightly weaker than Patriarch Jiang Yun of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Therefore, it was not an easy task to get a few immortal pills that could stabilize one's nascent divinity from him. Looking at the group of cultivators bustling about in a flurry, Wu Qi's heart raced. He sped up abruptly, using his full speed to fly towards the direction where the disciples of Grand Martial Palace were coming from. He did not hesitate to use the mystic technique in Scroll of Stealing that allowed him to burn his blood essence, increasing the speed of his innate water escape art by at least 10 times. In just 15 minutes, he had arrived near the 1,000 miles wide ice field where Lin Qiulua exploded. From afar, Wu Qi saw a lady clad in a white immortal armor hovering midair. She was waving her arms and legs like an evil ghost, howling and waving a long white whip and lashing down forcefully. Wu Qi cried out in alarm. Immediately, 10 Jindan pills sprayed out a stream of innate nectar, which quickly fused into Wu Qi's blood essence. Then he performed an incantation gesture, and in an instant, 30% of Wu Qi's blood essence vanished. With a sway of his body, he turned into a beam of blood-red light. With the cultivation base of Jindan realm, he exercised the divine ability of teleportation that only nascent divinity cultivators could use. In just a blink of an eye, he arrived right below Lin Qiulua. Yan Qijuan was waiting for his death with his eyes closed. Wu Qi casually waved his left hand, and a buzzing noise rang out from the innate earth element dragon scale shield as it shot out a beam of yellow light that enveloped everyone. A large sheet of golden dragon scales shot out from the shield, wheeling and dancing amidst the yellow light, forming a thick and heavy defensive line that blocked the white beam. With a loud bang, Wu Qi's legs went limp, and he almost knelt on the ground. A huge shockwave came through the yellow light, and Wu Qi's wrist felt numb, almost broken by the huge force. If not because he was suppressed by vagabond Qin Yi's enormous immortal pressure, which forced the blood essence of a few nascent divinity cultivators into his body, perhaps Wu Qi would have been thrown to the ground by the whip. Fortunately, both his fleshly body and cultivation base had improved greatly, allowing him to barely withstand the whip lashed out by Lin Qiulua in a fit of rage. The deafening noise made Yan Qijuan open his eyes in surprise. As a result, Wu Qi's ferocious face happened to come face to face with Yan Qiulua's ferocious face, as all his internal organs were shaking violently, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Rolling his eyes, Yan Qijuan sighed under his breath and said, "Why can I still see this young fellow's face when I'm dead? Can't you let me die a clean death?" Upon hearing Yan Qijuan's words, Wu Qi, whose body was trembling violently because of the heavy force of the whip, nearly flew into a rage. "What bullshit are you talking about? When I heard the news, I risked my life to come here and save you. What the fuck is wrong with that? If you want to die a clean death, I'll let you die a clean death right now, without leaving even a single hair behind." Yan Qijuan shuddered, then suddenly woke up. With a great surprise, he stared at Wu Qi and cried out, "Wu Qi, my good boy, why are you here? Are you the reinforcement sent by my father?" Wu Qi sneered. With a shake of his left wrist, at least 10,000 golden beams shaped like dragon scales shot out amidst deep, muffled whistling noises, thrusting towards Lin Qiulua. Countless golden specks smashed onto Lin Qiulua's immortal armor at top speed, causing her body to tremble violently like a fallen leaf in a storm. Unable to keep her balance, she was pushed several tens of miles up into the sky by the golden specks. Fiercely glaring at Yan Qijuan, Wu Qi clenched his jaws and said, "All the grand universal teleportation formations in Shui Yuan planet have been shut down. When their reinforcement arrives, your bones will be fed to the dogs." "Damn it, you bitch!" Lin Qiulua was caught unprepared by the sudden appearance of Wu Qi. Not even in her wildest dream did she expect that someone would come to save Yan Qijuan at this moment. What was even more unbelievable to her was the fearsome power of Wu Qi's Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield. Each of the golden beams weighed nearly 50,000 kilograms, and they were as sharp as blades. On top of that, they flew as fast as lightning, and the force of impact was simply unimaginable. Although Lin Qiulua was clad in an immortal armor, she was still struck by countless golden beams and felt a severe pain all over her body. The fierce aura unique to dragon scales pierced through the protection of the immortal armor, leaving behind tiny bloody marks on her delicate body. The immortal armor had protected Lin Qiulua's body from being ripped to shreds by the golden beams. However, the continuous impact from nearly 10,000 dragon scales, each weighing 100,000 kilograms, had made Lin Qiulua lose her balance, and she was knocked flying several tens of miles up into the sky. Lin Qiulua shrieked. She felt her head spinning because of the tremendous shock and impact, and her internal organs were tossing and turning. With great effort, she swallowed an immortal pill to restore her energy, then quickly channeled all the energy into the immortal armor. A loud rumble echoed out, as a blinding ring of white light burst out from the immortal armor. Several dozens of palm-sized immortal runes rushed out from the armor, wheeling and wheeling rapidly around her body. The air around her quickly gathered on the surface of her body, and very soon, it was compressed into a layer of green energy, about 1 foot thick. Every time the golden beams hit the green energy, they could only sink a few inches into it before they were knocked away by a tremendous counterforce. She lowered her head to look at Wu Qi and the others, laughed hideously, then swallowed 2 spirit pills to replenish her energy. After that, she bit the tip of her tongue and spat out a mouthful of her prime blood essence onto the white whip that was knocked back by the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield. Nourished by Lin Qiulua's prime blood essence, the white whip suddenly burst out with a tremendous ferocious power. In the blink of an eye, the whip expanded several hundred times, transforming into a huge soft whip that measured about 10 feet in diameter and tens of miles long. With a mighty swing, it smashed down from the sky. Wu Qi threw his head back and cursed furiously at Lin Qiulua. Then, with a twitch of his finger, the black dragon spirit ring automatically shot out several tens of life-saving immortal pills into the mouths of Yan Qijuan, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianqiu. With a sway of their bodies, a large amount of immortal energy rushed out from their bodies, wrapping them up like 3 silkworms. The tens of thousands of golden dragon scales shot back, transforming into a thick layer of defensive golden light that tightly wrapped around Wu Qi and his companions. Wu Qi exercised the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield with his mind. The dense layer of golden dragon scales wrapped around the 4 of them and began to spin at high speed. Like a drill, it brought them into the ground at an incredible speed. Amidst a series of buzzing noises, the 4 of them plunged several tens of miles deep into the ice layer. Then, with a sudden slanting movement, Wu Qi exerted all his strength to bring them several tens of miles away. A loud boom rang out almost right next to their ears, as Wu Qi and his companions howled miserably at the same time, blood spraying out from their mouths. Lin Qiulua lashed out with the whip, shattering the layer of Xianbing within 100 miles of circumference. Countless tiny ice crystals shot up into the sky, while the misty sunlight sprinkled down. At the same time, thousands of crooked rainbows of various sizes appeared in the sky above the snowfield, illuminating the entire snowfield with their colorful light. It was a magnificent and magical sight. Lin Qiulua had unleashed a powerful strike without hesitation. The tremendous shockwave knocked Wu Qi and his companions flying away. The white whip knocked away the numerous golden dragon scales on the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield. After flying for several tens of miles, they shot back at high speed, wheeling around Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi gave a long and sonorous cry and exercised the mystic eyes of universe. A wisp of purple and green divine flame of order shot out from his eyes like a raging flame. Not only could the mystic eyes of universe see through all the restrictive spells in the universe, it could also allow the user to search through the 9 underworlds, and also unleash all sorts of powerful offensive techniques. The divine flame of order shot out from his eyes and transformed into 2 tiny flying swords of purple and green colors, shooting towards Lin Qiulua in just a blink of an eye. The white whip brought up a strong gust of wind and pushed Wu Qi and his companions nearly 100 miles away. With great effort, Wu Qi managed to stabilize his body. Then he heard a miserable howl. In the distance, Lin Qiulua, who was surrounded by the green energy and white immortal light, had her entire body set ablaze with a purple and green flame. Howling and howling, she plunged down from the sky. The divine flame of order pierced through the green energy that was protecting the immortal armor, stuck onto the white immortal light, and severely wounded the divine will that Lin Qiulua had unleashed to control the white whip. Her nascent divinity was wounded, and the pain made her vision turn dark. She fell heavily to the ground like a huge rock. Amidst a purple beam, the spirit-restricting rope streaked across 100 miles, wrapping Lin Qiulua up like a rice dumpling and dragging her back. Lin Qiulua's energy essence, soul, and even her mind were sealed. Her eyes were wide open, and she had completely lost the ability to fight back. After consecutively activating the shuttle-shaped immortal item and the white whip, Lin Qiulua's energy was almost depleted. Now that she was trapped by the spirit-restricting rope, she had completely lost the ability to fight back. The white immortal armor was still emitting a faint white gleam, trying its best to resist the ferocious power of the spirit-restricting rope. However, a sharp howl was heard coming from within the rope. 3 cinnabar talismans flickered and flickered on the rope, and the white immortal armor's gleam dimmed abruptly. Slowly, it turned into a white liquid, squirming and wriggling, trying to shrink back into Lin Qiulua's body. But Wu Qi stretched his hand out and grabbed all the white liquid into the air. An exquisite armor the size of a fist appeared in Wu Qi's hand, emitting a faint white gleam. Casually, Wu Qi shoved the immortal armor into his forehead and sent it into the storage space in his spiritual ocean. The immortal armor trembled, and was about to launch a counterattack when the phoenix fire pouch flew over gracefully, unleashing a clump of purple and green divine flame that wrapped the immortal armor tightly. The immortal armor began to tremble with fear. Suddenly, Lin Qiulua opened her mouth and coughed out a stream of blood. The thread of divine will she left in the immortal armor was completely refined by the divine flame of order. Then he pulled up the bound Lin Qiulua, wrapped them up in countless golden dragon scales, transforming into a golden beam and plunging into the ground. They were about to flee. At that very moment, 3 figures were seen approaching from afar, bringing with them an immortal pressure that blotted the sky and blotted the earth. The leading figure was none other than immortal Chang Wu, whose face was filled with rage. The immortal pressure that felt like it had a corporeal body smashed onto the thick layer of ice around Wu Qi and his company. Suddenly, the layer of ice, 1,000 miles in circumference and over 100 miles in thickness, cracked and shattered. Countless ice shards wrapped around Wu Qi and his company, sending them flying up into the sky. Immortal Chang Wu's immortal pressure had locked onto Wu Qi and his company. "How dare you? Die!" he cried out sternly. Clenching both hands into fists, immortal Chang Wu thrust his fist towards Wu Qi and his company from a distance of several hundred miles away. When the fist was unleashed, the heaven and earth changed. Countless huge ice shards around Wu Qi and his company vanished into nothingness at the same time. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.